attached
Yeah,
to the fire
prices are
station.
crazy.
And I just want
Mom and Dad
connected
just,
is the
they're
word he
failing.
uses,
Dad's gonna be
connected to.
blind. I
So I
live
want
by
to
Junior
understand,
Boulevard.
like, is
Mom's,
he
yeah, it's been
imagining
he's
that
had
would be
surgeries. He's had
defined
injections
as
in
like
his
the
eyes now
old
for like 4
style,
years to slow it all
like the
down.
cables that ran
Mom's to the
from
point now,
pull
just like her mother.
boxes
She don't forget
back to,
anything. She
like,
just forgets she told
remember
you 10
those old
minutes ago.
setups?
Yeah.
So
Like,
we
we have
were
all of
looking
that
at options of
disconnected
being
in town.
closer
None of
to
those
them.
function
Yeah.
anymore.
So ADUs are popping
The
up
modern
all over the
version
place.
is monitoring
Kathy
companies and
I both agree we
911. So
cannot
there's
live in
cellular
900 square
dialers
foot
and
because they're capped
24/7
at 900.
emergency.
So Jackie
So
says,
is that
what
what it
about his
could
shop
mean
that he
in the
repairs
present
shop?
term?
If you
I just
go
want
to
to make
the
sure that
town
we're not going to
and get them requested
use an
for change
antiquated
of
phrase
use and
that
build on the
refers to
existing
technology that
foundation.
is no longer in
footprint.
service.
Where did
So I
it?
just want to ask him that
Berniston.
question.
Okay.
The
so not
Charlie's
that-
repair shop.
Oh yeah.
but-
Yep. So I had Jim Hopkins
Otherwise, he
meet me
didn't
up
seem to
here
have a problem
last
with it.
week.
Welcome to the Select Board meeting for Monday, March 31st. Called to order at 6:10 p.m. First item of business is discussion regarding Senior Services Director Position Screening Committee. That is a mouthful.
While you're loading that up, I see
Go
that
for it.
there's a memo here from Brian. We have 7 people, 4 previously and 3 new ones that expressed interest.
And then there was another one that came in today that I forwarded this morning from
must have missed
Rebecca
that one.
Miller.
It was just a few hours ago, I think. I saw that come by.
it came in earlier today.
I missed that one. I'll have to pull that one up. So then we have more than what we're looking for.
And that
Okay.
doesn't include one of us, right?
Well, I was
Right.
thinking about that.
Not that it has to, but it
Yeah,
traditionally does.
I was thinking about that before I realized that there was an 8th one and there was just a 7. I was going to suggest that we not have one of us be on it because it is a director's position. We are going to hold a second interview. I mean, I can't imagine we wouldn't. So we would all have an opportunity rather than having one of us go through the screening process to then have to re-interview them. If we have a screening committee that we're satisfied with, just let them do that process and hold the final for us. That being said, now that we have an
8, I guess.
8th person,
Well, maybe we address the first question first. And do we want to entertain possibly not having one of us on it, or
that would be my
What's your
suggestion.
take?
I'm okay with not having one of us on there, allowing more from the community and or employees, department heads, volunteers, be part of that.
what was the
Is it
dude?
worth having a de facto member as an 8th? To,
Like non-voting?
yeah. I know we've done that in other committees where
Like ex officio, yeah.
Brian
Yep.
has ex officio,
Yep.
sorry.
Yep.
Did it fall off? No, I took it off to look for an extension cord.
It fell off nicely back on the table. All good.
Sorry, yes. Right idea, wrong term. Ex officio member.
Yes.
Is there any?
Well, then I think was there a discussion or a question mark about the current director, or did you guys discuss that tonight? I wasn't here, or no? Okay, I wasn't sure.
No, I
We don't
believe,
necessarily, I can't recall. I think in many cases when we have had to hire 4 department heads, they have not been here any longer rather than been available to partake. So I don't know that we've been
Right.
faced with that
We haven't had that opportunity.
potential even.
Yeah.
So
Right.
right, wrong, or otherwise, and I'm not saying it is or isn't. If anything, that might be one I would lean toward as a ex officio.
So
'cause
you read my mind.
because
That's
it's-
what I was going to say. Because
brings
we have an 8th,
insight, but
if we have because we have 8, I would offer that up where they can participate and be there, but don't have a vote in the screening. Allow the other 7 members to handle that piece of it, but clearly has the length of history and knowledge of the job to assist the screening committee.
I could live with that.
it's also a lot of people to coordinate. So I don't know their availability, but I mean, there's the potential that they can't get everyone to a date too, I would assume, depending, so. We've plenty to have a quorum, obviously, but. Is there a,
There will be.
okay.
Give me 1 second.
And I'm gathering from our packet that there's some variety of, hey, I'd be interested, and some who have actually put that in writing and formalized it.
The ones that I
Within-
have in writing
Are in there.
are in the packet.
Okay.
Others had come in either to the office to express their interest well in advance or sent a note weeks ago in preparation.
Got it.
I mean, if you all are okay with that concept of using all 8 members, but having the current director be an ex officio, I'm fine with that as well. So, just to move that along and have that conversation.
Does that or does not include a board member?
That's my
That was
question.
before you,
Oh,
maybe before you do.
I personally don't think it needs to, but
No,
I'm
I-
one of 3.
I can see your point. We are going to have the opportunity to fully vet them ourselves, so.
So maybe I'll go in a different direction. So normally in these we traditionally do have a board member. We don't have a board member, and we don't have the town administrator as a member. Do we have some level of confidence or knowledge that someone is familiar with the process and kind of all the critical things that one of us would bring for that structure of how this should go and what needs to be done? And I'm not saying that they aren't capable, but we've all participated in a lot of these, so we just have a different level of experience. So that's going to be the one caution I bring.
One of the things I was going to mention was 2 of the members
Have done this before.
have done this before. One
Yes.
of them chaired the last one for a
Yep.
department head position,
Okay.
and actually was Brian
Sure.
was unable to be there for
Yep.
Right. either of the screening committees. Well, was able to make one, but I told him not to show up for fairness of
Sure,
keeping it equal. And that chair ran the process through from beginning to end
Okay.
seamlessly. So
We
I
met
have,
outside of the meeting so I could go over the process, and then she executed it. Correct.
yeah.
Yep.
And,
Okay.
And,
As
and,
long as
and
you
looking
have
at the
that
names of the
confidence, I'm
people
good.
on there, I think there are actually a couple others that have
They have
the-
experience on
the
it for
skill
sure.
set of being on those preliminary screening committees several times. So I'm confident.
Okay. Then that's the only question I would bring to it. So
You looking for a motion?
unless you wanted to discuss board
No,
member
I
more,
was preparing as well to
I'm gonna
move,
leave.
so,
whoever's there,
Whoever's there faster.
go
yeah.
for it.
I got you. I'm going to make a motion to appoint the following to the Director of Senior Services Preliminary Screening Committee. Becky Pachurik, Leo Parent Jr., Abigail Baines, Deborah Smith, Beth Gannon, Sally Delaney, and Rebecca Miller. And also Paula Betters as an ex officio member.
I will second that.
Do we need we can establish in there? Or do we already do that, or is it in
You
effect?
have not voted to establish, so we should add that in as a.
So just amend that to
Yeah.
establish and appoint in the opening there.
So you can withdraw
I will
yours.
withdraw my second.
All right, so the amended will be to establish and appoint the following,
Yes.
As you
as previously stated. You have those names still?
Yes.
You're good? All right. So that's what your second would be, to establish.
I will
and-
second that
All right,
motion
thank you.
as amended.
any other discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. Should have stopped you sooner.
Yeah, no, thank you for catching it.
Review and discuss proposed draft road opening regulation, second read.
I know I made some notes on this one.
We did not receive feedback from council on this one yet, correct?
Correct.
Oh, actually, it may have been one of the other ones.
Anything?
I did have a couple of comments. In Section 34.
Just get to
Let
that
me get the
right
right-
page.
I believe it's,
6 in our packet, or I'm sorry, 6 in the, 7 in the document.
yeah,
It's
page
14 in our
7 in the
packet.
document, I'm sorry. Looking, and section 34, 1, 2, 3, fourth line, 2/3 of the way across, it says cold planning. I believe it is meant to say cold planing.
Yes.
So that is a minor typo. And then jumping down to page 70, section 39 under fines, it imposes a $300 fine. And I must have read it too quickly because I was asking if that was a one-time fee or per day, but now looking at it a second time with fresh eyes, it does say fine per day. So that answers my question.
Where was that one?
It's section 39.
Section 39
I scrolled
fines.
right on past it. Okay, thank you.
And I agree, it should be per day, not a one-time impositions.
Okay.
Under 34, and maybe I didn't catch it somewhere else, just the concept of emergency. Is there a definition in here somewhere on who gets to determine it as an emergency and allow that? De facto, I'm assuming the process, but
So the emergency is gonna be one of two things, it's water or sewer. We don't have any underground utilities that go under any roads right now that we know of.
Williams Way.
sure.
Williams Way is the only one that you have another utility.
Correct.
Correct.
Where it may cross, so anything else right now, it's gonna be water or sewer emergencies, and
So it's
we've
going
all
to
been
be
there.
the town needed, the town decided, so,
Correct.
okay.
So would it make sense to add a definition to that
That's-
effect in the front?
Well, it is, but it isn't, because if it's a sewer connection for a private party, that could be under the road, that's connecting to town sewer, but it's not a town emergency. Could be
It's not a
private
town emergency, it's still private, because they own right to the sewer main.
Right. So just contemplating, and I'm not suggesting we change or adding language, but just ensuring that it's clear if someone needs to open it within that 5-year window for a reason they deem to be emergent, how do they go about ensuring that, or do we ensure we have the authority or the right level of approval in place? And I think this by nature says that, but I don't know if there's anything in there we want to maybe add to say that more explicitly. That's the only.
Well, would it
Just
be
thought
already in the
process as we were
review
going through.
process of the permit? Would that fall under it? Because in the review process, that we have 48 hours, I think, to review and approve or disapprove.
So you're thinking 21? Is that where you're referencing, like top of 6, page 6?
Your page 6 or my
Your
page
page
6?
6, I think. You think
Yes.
emergency permits there? But
Because it shows
then it
that,
says utility. I mean, and I would assume there'll be utility, but I guess I look at that one as more emergency, as in not time to fill out the permit. Not emergency as
Okay.
opening the road for 5 years. And two different kinds of emergencies
Correct.
in my mind. This one is, I don't have time to get you a permit because there's
do the job,
there's
do the
water coming out of the
permit.
road, you know,
after.
whatever.
Okay.
Versus a, there's a sewer emergency for a private party that needs to open the road, not in 48 hours, but needs to open the road in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, yep, understand.
So maybe just a lens for us to all read through it again or be thoughtful about that. And maybe I'm missing another call out somewhere in there that,
But I think they are the same definition.
I'm trying
Okay.
to figure out what emergency would not be like a break or something.
Yeah.
What would constitute an emergency that somebody would have to do it in the next few weeks? Like, I don't know, I can't think of.
well, I had one, so.
But
I
I
mean,
think
it needed to get done. It didn't have to get done that day. So it didn't fall under I have to do it in 48 hours. I would have had plenty of time to file a permit and everything. But if the road had just been paved, it definitely had to be done in less than 5 years.
Right. So I think
So-
I think you've identified an important concern, so I think you do want a definition for this, but I don't think you want to limit it to something that has to happen in 24 hours. I think you want it to be something that relates to existing services or existing utilities that need to be maintained and they can't wait.
They're an
years.
exception to the 5-year clause,
Right.
but not an emergency.
Right, that's what I was just trying to say
Okay,
is
all
like,
right. I see what
I
you're
think
saying.
the 5-year clause doesn't have maybe enough clarity on who approves
Right.
or what is an emergency or who gets to decide if it's an emergency. I'm not necessarily super concerned if we don't define every emergency scenario to open a road within the first 5 years. I more want to ensure that we have some definition on how and who gets to make that determination, that it does qualify or does not, which de facto is probably the superintendent.
Yeah.
But I think 21 emergency talks about opening any road within less than 48 hours, and really not so much about fresh pavement not being disturbed.
Yeah, I think,
A little nuance there.
So is that, so should that be where existing utility gets called out in here? So should, when an existing utility emergency is declared in
I think
that
it's-
21?
I think it's going to be that, and then your natural emergencies, flooding, when we
Right.
had to go in and stabilize. I think there's certain things that will occur that we can't control, but I think generally it's going to be existing utilities.
Well, and maybe we don't need to be that specific about what it is
Yeah.
to limit one we didn't think of today,
Right.
even in 21, but then maybe just to be a little more explicit in 34,
Four?
there we go. You know, if a protected street requires excavation due to an emergency, you know, outside of 48 hours, that, you know, emergency situation must be approved by, or something, you know, like, that it must meet the criteria for an emergency that would allow for opening of a road, right? And what all those scenarios are, I would probably think we would rather not try to
Probably not
describe.
list them,
We
yeah.
could leave 1 or 2 examples if you want to give someone a direction on what may or may not. But I would say, you know, but it's at the discretion of the superintendent on whether, you know, the emergency qualifies or something. I don't know the exact language, but you get what I'm trying to get toward.
the only thing I'm thinking of is just because the two really are different things.
Yeah, change the
Getting,
language.
getting away from the word emergency and
Okay.
having some category of an exception. Here's the rule, and the superintendent may, upon request, see if there's a request for an exception to the 5-year based on exigent, you know, circumstances. Some different language that sort of differentiates it from, we don't have a choice. In the next 48 hours, we've got to, you know, cut this open
Yeah.
and fix something that's an emergency. An emergency is just that. It has to be done now. An exception to the
an
5-year.
emergency- An emergency would override the 5-year as well.
As
but
well.
They're separate
Correct.
situations, right? Emergency covers everything that's inside of that 48-hour window.
Right, and I'm thinking of those that don't really fall into that. They're not. They're just exceptions to the 5-year window.
Right.
And there's certain circumstances that the superintendent could look at that and say, yeah, that actually makes sense. Why it would be an exception, and it's either approved or no, it doesn't make sense, and it's denied.
Right.
And
And really, maybe that first sentence stays the way it is in 34. Will not be permitted to be cut except in case of emergency or upon, you know, approval, you know, due to exigent circumstances.
yes,
You
so
know,
and adding
just
language
adding
to that.
to say, you know, an emergency
yeah,
is
yeah.
already defined, and additionally, you know, or you know, hardship or something that is approved by, right? Some language that kind of specifies. That's more what is discussed, and then in the rest of it, don't refer to emergency, just refer to if it is opened within that 5-year window, because it won't matter why. It's
just-
that it happened,
Right, and then it has to be closed.
and
in
then
a
it has
certain
to be
way.
done a certain way. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
I just feel like those are the areas where later we'll end up reevaluating when situations arise, because that's where they always arise, right? They
Absolutely.
arise in the areas that are difficult, not in the easy ones.
The only other two things that are still on here that we haven't addressed are the permit fee schedule. There was a note, there was a note on whether or not it should be general fund or revolving account.
Right.
I don't think we came to any concrete resolution on that. And then also the length of frontage that has to be redone. We didn't solidify language. Currently, the draft is 15 feet from curb to curb.
Yeah, and that's what we had talked about the last time. But I think we were talking about the minimum of 15 feet, then if for whatever reason the trench had to be bigger because of sloping for slope control, then Brian was thinking, we go like as a percentage, the percentage outside of that, then what is the next? Is it 20 feet? If it's a percentage of the size of what your opening has to be for the safe digging. So we're already at a minimum of 15 feet for anything, whether it's a 1 foot trench for 2 foot trench for water sewer, we're already at a 15-foot curb to curb.
Is there some minimum distance, and maybe this is what I asked last time, I think, is there some minimum distance from the cut in either direction you always want to get?
So that would be 7.5 feet at this point. If it's just a regular water sewer, then it would be a 7.5 feet
Or 7 or 6.5 from the cut?
from the cut. Yeah.
Right. So
From
I
the
just, I
15.
guess, and maybe it is more the larger the cut, and then a percentage might make sense, or some scale, but I guess that would just be my question, is how far?
And again, it could be everything different on site. It could be something that I approve on site also, if that's what it is. But when they ripped it up, if they had a bad cut and it's 4 more feet on one side but not the other, they had a clean cut, then, I think maybe that's something I could determine on site either. If we leave it at a minimum of 15 foot, and then I could make that
Well,
decision.
minimum doesn't necessarily give you the
Authority.
the leverage to say, well, no, that side's it's gotta be 20. It's the other way around. You'd have to set it higher and then have the discretion to decrease it.
To decrease it.
Or we'd have to, otherwise every time you have to sign off, because how would they know?
Right.
If you have the discretion to go higher, I mean,
Right.
I think the other ways, it's better to have discretion to reduce it if it allows than to try to increase it from what this says.
Agreed.
I still think the minimum should be 15 feet. That's being done.
From the edge of any cut.
Well, maybe total, for the 7.5 foot on each side of it to come up with 15 feet. I think it should be a 15-foot patch minimum. Wherever we come with, whether it's 7.5 foot from the center of the cut, from outside to outside.
See, I was thinking outside, if you just did 7 foot from the outside of any cut. So if you end up having to cut a 4 foot swath, it's still 7 feet from the edge of the cut, 7 feet from the edge of the cut, plus your 4 in the middle. Now it's an 18-foot swath.
Okay,
If you go from edge to edge, and as your trench gets bigger, you still keep that 7 feet on either side of the.
it's simple enough. That takes away any of your percentage over
Right. It just,
over the size of it.
But it doesn't help you if it's a bad cut and you feel like it needs to be now 11. So, I mean, I might at least do 10 and 10, and just say 10 foot, in either direction of travel from the edge of the cut.
From the edge of the cut.
And you probably do still want to add a line, although it's harder to, that the superintendent may require more or allow less at their discretion of the specific cut.
Yeah, I was
with
thinking that's
permission,
language
but-
with the 7, but because it
Well,
just.
that's fine
Yeah.
too.
Either way, it's
Either
going to
way.
be better than a 2 and 3 foot patch.
Yeah.
And again, even if it's a town
It
one,
gets
even
you
if it's a
where-
town job,
Yeah.
something that we have to do, we're going to follow the same thing also.
Of course.
If it's 7 and 7, I'm not going to say
Yeah,
it's right or wrong.
And
I'm
I
just-
think because the superintendent has the discretion of saying in the language, if we do that amendment, that they have the discretion to require additional
Right.
footage or can reduce as needed.
I don't know about a reduce because we're going to want to keep that minimum from the saw cuts.
Fair enough. Yeah, because we're doing it from the saw cut.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I think the ability to be able to have them cut more if needed, absolutely.
Okay.
That way there's straight, clean cuts and
Mm-hmm.
joints on both sides.
So how does that work if we actually put real language in there now?
Minimum of 7 feet in direction of travel, in both directions of travel from the edge of the cut. And, upon inspection, the superintendent has the authority to require additional
Additional.
distance or additional overlay or coverage as needed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then fees.
Yeah, the question that Brian posed was whether it's a general fund or revolving fund.
Mm-hmm.
We go back and forth on which one
Mhm.
is better suited.
I'd ask how much we gather, but
Not even enough for
Historically.
administration fees now.
Right?
right.
And I think it would be good to have it into, and maybe there's a cap that goes into it. And can you cap revolving funds at,
Mm-hmm.
you know, so then after that cap is met, then it goes into the general fund.
Well,
And
what,
if it's more needed, you know, at the next one, again, I don't see a lot of these happening in town as regular cuts. It's probably mostly gonna be emergency.
I think you would set it up if you wanted to go the 53.5 route. You would set it up like you do the other ones, probably with a $10,000 spending limit,
Right.
set annually?
set annually, and if something changes, it would come before the FinCom and the Select Board for a meeting just like this.
Yeah. And the hope is to just have the revolving fund that allows us to draw from for operating expenses,
Yeah,
Mhm.
wages,
after hours
everything
inspections,
related
whatever.
to
Yeah.
those,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
as much as is in the fund at the time.
Right.
Okay.
The new pavement open road is only in those exigent circumstances? Is that really enough? I mean, I don't know.
Considering our road opening permit fees now are $25 on any road.
Okay, we can always change them.
Mm-hmm.
Revolving fund, sound like we were leaning that way?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think it makes sense.
Let's plan that.
For ATM?
We have the others on there.
Well, you have to change the bylaw, and you have to do that. So I have to add another article to your, which is fine. We've done it before. Okay.
No, then no.
It's
'Cause
easy.
I said, I guess it's up to you guys. I think last meeting we said no more,
Yeah.
no new ads to the ATM at this point. It's too
Given-
late.
Yeah.
I mean, I already kind of put that out there last time, so. Will we do it as one? Sure. Will we establish it in the next meeting?
Okay.
I don't think there's any harm in waiting and doing it either at an STM in the future or,
I'm sure there'll be one.
yeah, there will be one. whether
Before our
it's-
next annual, so.
We've talked about one as early as the end of the fiscal year.
Correct.
so.
Pretty common.
Okay.
All right,
I'll
so
draft
we'll
it
put
and
it
get
on
ready for
for an STM.
Okay.
But we'll plan for one.
But for now, it'll just stay general, because that's easier.
If something came in the meantime, it'd go into the journal.
Okay.
Anything else on the regs? Okay, so
No.
we've got those few changes and then we'll
Do a third read.
look for, and any feedback from council.
Yep.
And we'll go from there.
All right.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Review and discuss proposed amendments to the water department regs, second read.
And this was also sent to council, and I haven't heard back yet.
Okay.
Can I just mention something that I've mentioned to both superintendents, and I was discussing with Scott before the meeting, and I think I mentioned this to you the other day when I saw you. in all three of these regs, while they're all separate topics, they all are dealing with underground utilities and cutting of the public way. One thing that I don't think any of them are adequately addressing is how do we address expectations for other utilities in close proximity to these utilities in our public ways. So I'll give an example of electricity. If you have underground electrical service and it's in close proximity, a couple feet of the water lines or the sewer lines, is there a local expectation that you all are going to have for how that's installed? Or is it up to the utility to choose? And I don't know that we have the answer today, but I just think as we're going through this is our opportunity to try to contemplate what that would look like, and it's largely going to be telecommunications or electricity.
Do we have language, well, as we've looked at some of this stuff, have we found any language in other communities related to that?
I have not, but I am happy to go back out and see what I can find for you. It made me think of it not only because we've had a recent issue, but you all were being very thoughtful in terms of water service line connections and what's going to be allowed materials versus not permissible materials. And so if we're going to specify what it takes to connect your systems, I think it's also reasonable to work in, at least on the road trenching regulations, if there's another utility using your layout, what's a minimum expectation?
I mean, I'm sure there's some things out there on what's recommended and
Mhm.
what's allowed is probably less so. And we would probably prefer what's recommended. So if we can, I mean, I'm leaning to if we can find some language that talks about it,
Okay.
some separation or some methods, depending on how close it is,
Okay.
that are better. Because I know, utility can be direct bury, but you don't necessarily want to put everything next to each other in that mode
Right.
because of the issues that you can find later.
Right. Okay.
So I do think it would be good to incorporate something if we find something out there. If there isn't, I'm not sure where we would exactly start to define those, but maybe we can put in some looser guidelines if we don't find anything kind of out there to copy.
I can always reach out to DigSafe as well and see if they have some recommendations on that.
Yeah. Makes sense to me. Okay.
Guessing we won't have to completely reinvent the wheel.
I would not expect so. Might have to go city because city might be more organized around it because it's so dense, but
Right.
either way. Rural, you don't have as much underground as some of those areas.
Right.
Okay,
Yet.
water. Yep. Water regs. Comments, questions, concerns?
I've got go ahead, Jim. I'll
so-
defer to you.
On, again, Article 4, Section 380-12, Item C, second line, I believe the red line correction should read owner or the water department, not their water department.
It was 38012, Section C. Got it?
I can
And
delete that one.
then, jumping down to what is now 38041B, special provisions, which is on, where did I lose it? Page 8. My question is this consistent with 38012C above? Do they?
Could you repeat which one it was on 12? Or on page 8, sorry.
Page 8 is 380-41B Bravo,
Okay.
starting meters over 1 inch.
Yep.
Just wanted to, it was something that led me back to 380-12C above to make sure that the two aligned with each other.
Oh, the one that says as requested, and this one says shall be done annually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if there's an opinion on that, whether it shall be as requested or shall be shall.
I think we talked about this one last time, and it was shall, but was only by request in effect currently. Is that accurate? Greg said shall be done, but we were exercising it in a shall be done upon request.
That's what we were looking for, yes. I did a little research, went out, checked around with some neighboring water systems departments. The common thing with all of them was they don't do it annually. They do it if someone has or think there's a discrepancy with the meter, or if the meter, because we're talking about larger size meters, if they rack up, 500 million plus gallons, then maybe, at a point, test it. And that's just with the discretion of the department.
So we would just want to get those consistent with
Right,
shall.
and if it shall be
upon
done
request.
upon request of.
Of the
our-
first part,
our-
like what you said on
right.
on the second one.
So
Just
update
change
the
that.
second one to match the first one.
Yeah, I would.
That's in 41B.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
38012, since we were there, D is still D, because D looks like it's after the edit. So I think it's the editing, but
It is the editing.
D is still no plastic lines, right? And D still exists?
Yes. There's a D that was added below
Because D
it.
became E, then D.
Yeah,
But
that's
the D shows up after. It's just an editing thing, right? That is still D as it's
Right.
standalone, just no plastic?
Correct.
Okay.
But on that
And-
topic, that was an open item from you all, and Pete and I had a follow-up conversation about materials that are acceptable.
So the other part on materials, as far as from the curb stop to the house, the consensus, a lot of people are, they're allowing the plastic as long as they put the tracing wire on it, and then also a foot or so, 14 inches above, as you bury it, put the buried tape. A lot of them are doing it because copper is so darn expensive, and the other reason, if you use the blue CTS plastic, it has a higher handling capacity for freezing, where copper would split. This will actually expand a little, not split and blow. So there is some advantages to it. The only hard part is to make sure they put in the tracing wire and the caution burial tape.
That can be inspected afterwards and verify it's readable, right?
before they
it's
bury it, yes.
completed. Well,
Yep.
and even after, you can do the tracing, the tape, right? You can have it checked.
Yep.
So other places are doing it. Are you saying you would want to?
I would like to have that choice.
Okay.
I wouldn't do a
Is it
pit
supposed
out.
to be one or the other? Or are there other options? Is it copper
You can use
or
copper or the
this
blue CTS plastic.
CTS only?
Yep.
So should we, if we're open to it, then we should be
Yeah, I was gonna
explicit and
say,
change it to
I'm-
that.
I'm not a professional.
Right,
in the
and
field.
the one
If you-
fault with the way this was written, they said to put a meter pit outside. The problem was that they've had problems with, after talking to some people, the pits get flooded, then your meter's underwater, starts corrupting your meter. So it's better just, if you can do the plastic, put it like normal, put the meter in the cellar of the house. Then it's better protected from the environment.
So can you make some edits then based on what you'd like it to be? And
Sure.
then we can review it afterwards. I think it'd be cleaner than, unless there's any concerns, but you're the expert, so I think our
Sure.
stance is, if
Yep.
it makes sense to you and it's the best to do,
Yep.
then let's update the language accordingly and
Mm-hmm.
then we can review it.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And under 380A, just because we're there, and
Oh,
don't
I'm there
interject
too.
if you had
I have one
others.
on that, yeah.
Where are you
Um,
on?
38012A,
38012.
sorry,
Okay.
12A. The type of meter, that should be the water superintendent, not the commissioners. Because I
Right.
don't. Okay?
I agree.
You should determine
Excellent.
what the approved meter will be if it's an exception from. Okay. Jim, if there were more you had, I we could chip that
No,
off of that.
those are the only two comments I had in this pass. Thank you.
I had a few.
Please.
Let me get there. Small stuff. So in Article 3, new services, 380-5, the second to last line where it's all the edits, changing it from water commissioners to the water superintendent or designee. It probably should just say water department, because it's who they're submitting it to. They're, if in the absence of the superintendent, there could be a designee, but it's just cleaner where the person submitting it to the water department internally, who reviews it, that's the superintendent or designee,
Sure.
but that doesn't need to be in
Okay.
there. You had a comment on there, Brian, about could 10 business days be permissible? I guess that would be a question for you.
I think 10 is plenty.
So the staff try to do it probably in an unreasonable time frame. The next day, the day after, that's not reasonable. You all, being the commissioners, only meet usually on the normal schedule twice a month. So I believe this language was included to give your board enough time to call a meeting to review that. So if we are clarifying that the approval does rest with the superintendent, I don't think we need 30 days, but I do want it to be clear that 2 days is not reasonable either.
Correct.
So there needs to be a certain amount of time to review and make a reasonable decision.
Well, it says prior, but it doesn't say we'll approve it. Anyone will approve it within those 10 days either. So it can be longer
Good.
because it has to get approved.
It's at least the minimum that they need is the 10 days
Right.
before the work is scheduled to occur.
Right. But that could be delayed by not getting an approval.
Could.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to
just
be
wanna
clear
make
about
sure that that's-
expectations.
And I agree. I'm just being clear that the expectations, that's the earliest if approved,
Right.
not that it will be or sooner.
Correct.
That's all.
Correct.
So the 30 days versus 10 days is more of, we're willing to try to get to it sooner, but it
Right.
doesn't mean we will. It just means we're willing to kind of set that as we should be able to within that amount of time
Right.
normally.
Correct.
All right, well, to that point, then just insert the word anticipated commencement of work. 'Cause it's not etched in stone. if it's
Or
not
at
approved.
least, right?
Yeah.
Or something.
Yeah,
And again, and maybe you just add on to that to say, and no work shall commence until approved. Because this is really just the application, but you might as well say it in there.
yeah.
At least 10 days prior, and no work shall start until application has been approved.
Okay.
Uh, 380-6, just a simple typo, where you changed it from approved to license, change it from and to A. Preceding that. A licensed.
Got it.
Dropping down to D within that same category. Do we still want that to fall with us to defer it? I mean, everything has been leaning towards the superintendent.
No, to that point, then in the first sentence of 380-6, before the sub-bullets, it says the water commissioners will approve the list. Contractors. Are we? Or
We haven't
They are.
previously. It's not. It's a non-existent thing.
right. But really, I mean,
So we raised that question about what is an approved contractor to work on the system. And I think we were noting that some districts have an approved process where their district or the commissioners have approved a list of eligible vendors that homeowners or property owners can pick from. We could develop a process like that if you wanted to, or we could refer that to somebody else if there's another professional standard. However we word it, we just want to make sure that the standards that you all hold for this requirement are being met. I don't want to create a situation where anybody can work on the system, whether they have training or licensure or not. in terms of D, to the earlier question, this is similar to like what we do in the cemetery. There's a period of no excavation
Yeah.
unless there is an allowance by a higher governing board. So if you want to defer that to the superintendent, that's fine, but usually we take appeals to you all. So,
Fair enough.
Well, this doesn't state it as a repeal, this states it as an option. Whereas those are usually, there is a moratorium and, or
Right.
a period of time where it's excluded except by exception. I guess that's my issue with that language.
Okay.
I would either make it approval by the commissioners because there's already a section that says it won't be done between these two periods. And then make sure we also have an, exigent emergency call out, like we just talked about in the road opening with, there's a break in 40 hours, whatever, that kind of thing, that
About
kind of
why they would
situation,
do
it
it.
gets addressed, right? Again, that's not likely an installation, so it probably isn't an issue, but
Right, because this is installation.
this is installation, so I mean, I would recommend if we're gonna do that, we change it to be, no new service connections will be made between these dates, unless, an exception is made by the water commissioners.
That's fine. I like that
Sure.
language better.
Okay, just to flip it.
Yep.
Back to the first part, though, that we talked about the licensed or insured contractors. Do we want to maintain a list? Do we still need, I mean, this one isn't going to get done in a third read. So,
no.
do we want to understand if there are some regs out there we can just reference?
Uh,
That'd be my preference, rather than trying to maintain a list, but,
That's all I was going to say, is if there's a checklist of, as long as they meet these requirements, X, Y, and Z, then, and they hold the credentials,
yeah,
then they're satisfied. And that's,
if we can get that.
the
then
list
that's
changes
ideal.
all the time of who meets those regs based on
Right.
what licenses they hold and what work they do.
Right. Okay.
So then we would change that, not that there's a list approved by us, but that there's a criteria
Right,
that's approved by us.
right, that meet whatever, well, credentials.
Yeah.
All right, we'll work on a recommendation for that.
That one got answered. Michelle had put some information in there. I don't know if she was gonna double check with Vadar about the due date. I don't know if you've heard anything
Not-
since then.
Heard back from Michelle, so I will get
Okay.
that follow-up.
Let's see, I had a. In 380-37,
Okay.
under the shut-off procedure, we added the language of the water commissioners reserve the right to do a shut-off. I think the word bill, either remove it or capitalize it, either way.
Okay.
And then also, it's just a personal thing, but the shut-off, you know what, now that I'm reading it again, it's not sooner than 75 days. I was just saying the timeline seems quick.
Yeah.
Because we had discussed that, we want to reserve the right to be able to do that, but it doesn't talk about any additional steps other than, here's the
Right.
timeline, there's the 30-day mark, there's the 45-day mark, there's the 75-day mark, and then we can shut it off.
Right.
And I don't know if we want to hone in on what those steps are, what the timeline is. Are there additional steps that could occur prior to requiring a shut-off?
Okay.
And I don't have that answer. It's just when I read it this, over the weekend, it was more about, is there an opportunity to hold off on doing shut-off in,
Right.
10 weeks after it starts?
And I think that speaks to your predecessors and the current practice of using the municipal lien process.
Versus
avoid that?
Yeah. Right.
Um,
So I think just honing in on that
Yep.
and maybe, cleaning up that language a little bit.
Okay.
I don't have any draft right now. I just wanted to call it out so it can be a note for.
Mhm.
Let me ask council if they can recommend maybe some clarifying structure or language to that section.
Maybe at a minimum, extending the 75 out a little further from the 60 prior. If
That's what I
nothing
was
else,
thinking, yeah.
and maybe
Something
saying
to
no sooner
90.
than, but maybe later.
I was
Like
gonna
90?
say to out to 90 as opposed
At
to
least, yeah.
yeah,
Something like that,
30,
yeah.
45, 60, and then
It's pretty tight.
It is.
And
It
it's all
just felt
from
tight when I
original
was
date.
reading it. I was like, it felt tight. It
It's
just,
none of it's from the last notice. It's all from the original date too. So if one notice is later, you just tighten that up, and there's not any.
yeah, you don't push anything out.
No, which
So I think asking if there's any recommendations on how to sort of follow with the thought process that we're saying, that we still want to reserve the right, but obviously we want to take other steps between the first missed payment
Right.
to the eventuality of we're saying, okay, none of these other remedies are working,
Right.
and we're going to have to shut it off.
Okay.
But it seems like we said we wanted that, but the language is still the archaic language of you missed a payment, you missed the second billing cycle, 2 weeks later, we're shutting it off.
Right.
That's it.
right.
And so I think just cleaning that up a little bit.
Okay.
I know we're about to start our joint meeting.
Yeah, you have a little bit more.
I have 2 more, I believe, and that's
If
it.
they're quick, that's
They
fine.
are-
If not,
they
we
are
can
very
continue
quick.
it.
One was, Brian, you asked a question about are sketch acceptable? I don't think we have to require everybody to do full-on engineered plans, do you?
No.
I'm just asking. I mean,
I would-
I mean, I would just both either of them.
That's fine, but I would just say what you got on your last one was somebody taking a stretch of paper and it was a line.
Right.
yeah.
So is that acceptable?
No.
So I think
So we have to have a balance.
we have to find a
All right.
balance.
All right. So
The guys were able to go back on that one and do some tie-ins and find some lengths and work with the property owner. So I think that we can help people get there, but we should be explicit about what the minimum requirements are.
I was just going to
So
say
you sketch with appropriate landmarks.
yeah,
and,
with-
that meets the requirements
to scale.
reviewed by.
and,
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
Something.
there's got to be some sketch language out there that says it's not surveyed, but it's
yeah,
accurate
not
enough.
everybody has to go and hire a surveyor
Agreed.
to go out
Sure.
and create, official documents, but there has to be some.
So maybe we can find some language that
See if
kind
I
of
can find
finds that
something.
balance.
Yeah.
Okay.
While we're finishing up, if finance and capital would like to come up and get settled, you're welcome to.
I think my last one is 380-52.
38052.
It's on page 10. Under the appeals, the appeal may be made, but there's no language about how long we have to respond.
Okay.
And I think we need timelines put on us. I mean,
You
it
just made me think of state government that didn't have some, but this is moving
yeah,
on.
you only have 30 days to file the appeal. I have
My
an
response
indefinite
is
amount of
forever.
time.
Okay.
Which no, that doesn't work for me. I want to set a timeline on ourselves that we
That makes
have.
sense.
We have
Right.
to act in a certain amount of time as well.
That makes sense.
So,
Okay.
I
you want to spend
think
timeline on a success.
one last one. Do you want to include temporary water connection charges, fees to this appendix? And my question to you would be, give me the nuanced difference between a temporary and a permanent. I mean, they're still doing the work. They're still going in and digging out and replacing, correct?
Describe an example of a temporary, because
Um,
that's no, I think.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
It's been done here before where, because they couldn't get the repair to supply water to the house, and it was for a couple days. I've seen it done where they just tapped onto their neighbor's garden spigot. I've seen it where we've hooked to a hydrant, because it's the same water, flushed the hydrant, and then we actually had an end cap for a temporary bypass to supply the house with water so they can use their toilets, bathe, whatever.
I got to think about
Well,
that.
I
a
thought
little
we'd
more.
done some for construction or stuff off of. I guess
All right,
not-
that's a
like
longer
off a hydrant,
conversation.
but yeah, okay.
I thought it was
Then
going to be
that's
a.
not what I expected
No,
from the answer.
I thought it was going to be a 5-second response, so I need
Okay.
some more thoughts on that one. Maybe I'll touch base with you about that
Okay.
and get a little further.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. The only ones that I will add from there, well, one question: do we want to accept all the red lines so far to clean this up, or do you want to look at the red line as it is before we accept them?
I don't have a problem with the red line the way they were presented.
I'm okay with
Yeah.
Accept the
And there
red
was some
lines we had.
modifications to the red line tonight, so obviously addressing those and,
Just for my record keeping, when you get ready to schedule the hearing to adopt this, and if a citizen wanted to come in and see the changes, are you just proposing to present a clean copy? Or do you want to also offer them a red line version? So it just helps me keep the two versions clean or separate?
Because you can accept but still keep tracks.
Yeah.
To be able to show a final tract.
Correct.
I don't have a problem with that, because I think people,
If we can
because,
do tract, I prefer tract, but
Yeah. But you want to review
we also
a cleaner
want a
version.
cleaner copy, so.
Agreed.
yeah.
Okay. So I'll
like,
keep them
accept
separate.
to there and then
Yeah.
new since, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Just want to make sure
Yep.
As long as you can
keeping
do
the right
both
thing.
manageably, if not, we can do clean, but.
that's fine. Okay.
In 38013, you have Erving Water Department. I know you've struck it in a variety of places.
We only have one water department, so.
It's a good point. Currently. Also in 38027.
Okay.
Same. And in, just where we just were, where'd it go? In 38051B, just whatever we do up in, I think it's 12, around the licensure and stuff and requirements, that talks about a licensed water line installer. Up in 12, we talk about a licensed person who has experience with water. When we figure out what our criteria is, let's just make sure it's consistent throughout.
That makes sense.
That makes
And
sense.
in 38053, you have Erving again.
That was 53?
53, yep.
Yep.
And that's the last one that I had.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
We'll get working on that.
All right, with that, it is 7:08. Call the joint meeting. The joint meeting with the Finance Committee and Capital Planning Committee to order. Reviewing the FY 2026 operating and capital budget requests, proposed plan, draft annual town meeting warrant. And yes, Finance does not have a quorum tonight.
We will have a quorum hopefully after 7:30.
Okay,
Always another meeting.
okay,
Yeah.
I assume so.
excellent. Well, we can work on through some of the discussion pieces and we can hold off on any kind of
Okay.
decision-making until then. All right, I'm going to jump around a little bit because they impact our decisions here. So I'm going to jump down to one that we didn't come back to, which was discussion regarding FY26 base wage adjustment for non-union employees. So we had started the budget season and set a 2% kind of as a incorporate this, and we'll be making a decision later, but it won't be less than, I think was the guidance or something like that. But we didn't make a decision. So I think we still need to discuss, are we making any change to what that number is? And then we do need to formally vote it to make a change to our tables. At least as I understand it.
Yes, I'm fine with leaving the 2% as is. I don't see how we could increase it. I think it was put in as a placeholder. Language said not to be dropped down. I don't see that we have the capacity to go higher, and I don't feel that 2% is, I think it's a suitable amount.
Okay, we'll wait to make any formal statement, but I just wanted to, or formal vote, but I wanted to make sure we just cover that because it will affect the numbers here. So we'll come back to finalize that. But right now, directionally, we're not looking, no one has a request to make a
No,
further increase at this point.
and this, the numbers we're seeing right now, if I'm not mistaken, based on what Brian said, are already inclusive of that 2%, correct?
That is correct,
So
yep.
that's-
We baked those
By
in from the
making no
beginning.
changes, then this is what it is. It doesn't change. Okay.
Correct,
making sure
yes.
I-
If we make no changes to the
Then the
to
deficit
the
we see
2%
today is.
placeholder, then it
yes.
is as it is presented.
Okay,
That is correct.
thank you.
Okay. We'll come back to, you may have missed that, Brent, we'll come back to voting formally on making a base wage adjustment for 26 once FinCom has a quorum. But at this point, there's no interest in discussing something different than the 2%. Okay. Check through the operating capital request, revenues, plan, et cetera. So last time we had a deficit, and regardless of whether we do today or not, the ask from everyone was to come back with areas or thoughts on adjustments to get us into balance. So kind of go around the group if there's anything that each person identified, at least have them, whether we choose to act on them or, what other
Yeah.
changes we may make. So,
Sure, I'll start.
you want to start? Okay, go for it.
I think I had mentioned it at the last meeting. It's been a couple weeks, so memory could be fading me. But I was looking back at previous years and where we're at with the secondary education. And historically, because they base their assessment to us on future projections of students, it's always in flux, as opposed to Franklin Tech, which does it on a trailing enrollment, and that is a static number that does not change. When they give us the assessment, that is the assessment. There's no change based on the next year's enrollment. In years past, we have level funded that or even decreased it with the knowledge that if it changes, we'll have to find a way throughout the entire budget, the omnibus budget, to change that or come back to the voters and say we need more based on unforeseen circumstances or enrollment changes. I think it's a feasible amount given the amounts that have been unexpended in secondary over the number of years to think that we could use that line item to balance this and know that there's a high likelihood that we can, if the need does arise above and beyond what we would reduce that line item to, that we could find it within one of our other budgets throughout the year without even having to go to the town for additional raise and appropriate. So that would be my ask, is that we look at the secondary just based on a historical.
And your recommendation would be to level fund based on actual last year instead of
Yeah.
budgeted last year?
Yeah, I mean the actual, because the numbers of
I agree with you.
yeah,
It was on my
the
list
number
too.
yeah
so.
the numbers of students that are leaving sixth grade and transferring over as are not increasing. So the assessment should be coming down year to year. Those numbers keep decreasing.
Did you have that number difference
do
in front of you?
not.
No,
I
okay,
have
that's
to-
fine.
I have
We
to
can
pull
come
it
back
up.
to it. Others, or was that your primary one?
That was my primary.
Who wants to go next? Linda, did you have anything? No, Ben?
Nothing that we already haven't talked about multiple times. Putting some kind of fee on garbage collection, evaluating the fees that we charge currently for things and seeing if they're appropriate. I don't feel that that would be a whole lot of money, but it would at least be more in line with the neighboring towns around us. But nothing above and beyond, like, I hadn't even thought of that, Scott. It's a good idea.
And those things, well, not contemplating their merit, they're not going to be something we're going to materialize for balancing the budget
Nope.
right now. Coming back to secondary, so stage 2 is the most current in Zobrio, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the 25, let me see, where do I want to go here? So the 23, which was FY24, budget was 1,288. We'll say 1.288 million, just for a easy number. That was the actual, was 1,288. The budgeted was 1,477. So well under what was budgeted. The current FY25 budget is 1,409, so it came down about 70. Expended so far is if I'm reading that right, yeah, 1065. Now, I don't believe that's a final number though. We would likely have more, or is that,
I can't remember if they bill they may bill quarterly.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it's possible that there's a June 30 bill that we'll have to pay.
okay. So that may bring it up to 1.3 something if that's a quarterly.
Say it one more
Calculator
time.
handy. If that is 3/4 of what it'll be, then maybe it will be close to what was requested, but I lean towards, do we do 1.288 like it was the last full year that we actually had? And then we can adjust if we need to.
Yeah, I was thinking either that or just decreasing it by the 106, 343, whichever is smaller.
The actual year-to-date? The 1065 is the actual year-to-date.
No, I'm saying our deficit of 106.
Oh, the
343.
deficit. Okay,
The-
gotcha,
the,
gotcha.
The delta.
gotcha.
So
Okay, I
we're
gotcha.
looking to fill a gap of 106, 343.
I hear you. Okay.
So if the delta between actual from 24, you know what I'm saying?
I got you now.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm
If
following
that
you.
delta's bigger, I'm not saying we have to reduce all of that.
It's
Just the one-
less. It's 73. So
So-
delta is 73. So if we brought it down 73, it would be what the actual 24 was.
Okay, so then
So-
that would be, so it
So
wouldn't be
not
the one-
lower than that. Obviously,
Correct.
it won't balance.
Correct,
Okay.
I wouldn't go
got it.
lower than that.
Okay.
So then we'd still be looking at about 33 somewhere, give or take.
Okay. Just to put numbers to it.
Yep.
And if you see something wrong with my math as you're watching this go by, Brian, please let me know. Who wants to go next?
Refresh me, what was the deficit to begin with?
What was it last week when we left?
106, 343?
Something.
Okay.
Just over 100. Did you have anything?
No,
Okay.
I kind of agree with what Ben said, though, look at our fee structures and everything else. So, other than that, you guys know more of the intricacies than I do.
Well, one other thing that we could do is I know that when we put in the money for the placeholder for the truck, we had it at 450, but that was a fungible number. There's no reason that we couldn't make that 420.
Except that we'll have to find it next time.
Right.
True, but we're gonna have to find
Kicking
half
the
of it the
can
next
down the
year
road.
anyway.
Right.
Sure. It's
Whether
kick
it's
the can.
30,000 more or less is.
Right.
No, you're right. I did talk to Chief about that last week or the week
And-
before, and I asked him about, I think he has 350 in the proposal, but that's based on the 700.
Mhm.
And again, it's going to be contingent on what we decide and what the final is. The indication I got from him was it's more of what the town wants to commit to 1 year, 2, and less about an exact number that they define,
Yeah.
which
Okay.
was a little more favorable than I expected.
Oh,
For an
okay.
answer, I would assume there's some floor, but it didn't sound like it is a real firm, like you got to pay at least 50% up front or at least, 45% or something. So we may have a fair amount of flexibility on that one. As long as we've made the commitment to, go the whole distance.
Didn't we also have some flexibility on the cemetery?
Well, we were choosing, right? I think the recommendation was to provide some cash funding to start and then likely recommend borrowing for the project.
But I
we-
think the cash funding to start was,
Do we do 150?
I think it was something like
200.
that.
200.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The other thing is we could do a borrowing authority and not pre-fund it with cash
Yep.
at all. And potentially, if it's a small amount spent in the first year or whatever year, if we had money to balance that without borrowing, we could always execute that way.
Mhm.
We've done that before. Okay. Others? Anyone else? Did we get an answer from the assessors? And I can wait and come back to it when Dan's here about the overlap
Oh, yeah.
period. That was an
6
open
months or
item, and I
9
don't
months.
recall seeing anything. Don't believe you received any response on that, right?
You're talking about the ATB?
No, the overlap period.
Personnel.
the
The new-
Personnel
For hiring
overlap
a
for
new-
the
Oh,
assessor.
no, sorry.
Never heard back on if they needed the
No.
full amount that they had, because there was some variation there.
Right, no, I did not hear back.
Um, Jim, anyone else? Did I miss anybody? Did you have anything, Doug?
I think you guys have covered most of it. The only thing I thought of was we requested level funding, so any department that did not level fund to have them level fund. That was part of the instructions. I know there was some question about how stern the instructions sounded or if that was the message delivered, but I expected to see level funded budgets except for the parameters that we gave, which I think was staffing and that, and there are a couple who did not do that. So I would say that to me would be one of the first places we started was those departments need to level fund their budgets. And I also will just add, I agree with Ben. I think last year we asked department heads to look at ways to raise fees and look at that. And we had them do that exercise, but we kind of dropped the ball and never went back and revisited it. And I think that is something that, I know we got something this week from Pete Sanders, but I think that is something that moving forward, we do need to actually sit down and look at and consider.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I think we
It's easy to
mentioned.
get lost in the budget gut balance to redo what we had to do and we moved on until the next cycle, but
Yeah, and I
in
think
between's when we gotta do those.
Yeah.
the comment was made a couple weeks ago that we need to start that like this summer. Like
Yeah.
really, that's the project, so that you have a framework that you're coming into the budget season in the fall with those, numbers in mind.
Yep.
Yeah, well, like my comments, Ben, you can't
Yeah,
implement
can't
those
do
in
it.
time to figure out what we're gonna do for
Correct.
a budget.
Yeah.
You need to spend the 6 months before getting it ready.
But not waiting until the fall to say, oh, we have to do that now.
Yeah.
It's-
Or budget season.
Yep.
Right.
We got enough going on.
This is what, second or third budget season where we've had to make cuts and do this, so we know that the pattern is not changing. So I think we need to look at what we can do to generate some revenue.
In the memo you had, and was that it for ideas and other options? I had secondary as well, so I'm not gonna revisit that one. I think that there was another, but if it comes back to me. In terms of the expected receipts and such, and the budget numbers, was there an update the other day, or is this as current as it is? Thought I
This is
saw
current as it
something,
is.
but this is it, okay.
Yep.
And then going back to the requests that we had covered last time, we've incorporated everything with the exception that 106 did not incorporate the additional firefighter, correct?
You're talking about the new budget summary?
Well, from last time when we said we had 106 deficit, it did not include.
I just want to clarify, on the summary I gave you, 106 is not your deficit. That's
No,
your-
last meeting, not tonight,
Okay.
last meeting.
So in red on your memo,
Yeah, it says it's not in there,
it says it's not, you're correct.
which is still not in there in this either.
That's correct.
Okay.
I didn't add
So
anything that
106
you
is
didn't
the
discuss.
surplus now, it's not the deficit from last week. But I think it was close to the same amount the other way.
If you were to make all of the changes, it was just over 100. So I
Okay.
think it was a close number.
Okay.
But what is reflected is the change you told me to make for the library, the change for the police department.
Okay.
Those are now reflected.
Okay.
And I have not made any other changes other than the change in the revenue for new growth.
We got feedback on some of the other questions that were out there, so is that clear? Do we have other questions, for example, on the benefits piece? The numbers that include the 50 recommendation covers all positions that are currently incorporated in the proposed budget, whether they're filled or not.
Okay.
For those that are not filled, they're included at the average benefit rate, not the max. And it leaves capacity for approximately one average
Plan change.
change from
Right.
what's proposed. Either what's already being taken or average rate for those that are not filled.
Correct.
All that adds up to there's enough for one average plan more, or changes totaling one plan. Which if we incorporated the firefighter,
It would use that.
would use that, and there is
Okay.
no capacity for change.
Correct.
Assuming everyone is same or takes average who isn't employed.
And we'll know
So-
more after open enrollment, which is in April, but it
But
will
not
be
in time
right
for
at
this.
time. Correct. Correct.
For the annual, obviously. So only say that to add, I don't feel like that's a lot of bandwidth, so it does concern me. So we
And-
don't have much flexibility there.
I just want to make sure, because I know sometimes there's a little bit of a discrepancy. That includes any and all open positions for the school as well. That would be a benefited position, so that those positions are also included in this.
It's my understanding that the few remaining positions that were on the town side and the school side were being accounted for.
Okay.
But again, it only leaves one, so if there's any change in any
Yeah.
of that, town or school side, it's just one.
Okay. Which we may or may not be filling.
Right.
Okay.
But things like the cadet seem to be a full-time position, so that is incorporated even though it's not filled, those kind
Yeah.
of things.
Okay.
That was my understanding from the treasurer's feedback.
Is the treasurer okay with, I'm kind of asking you to look into a crystal
Mm-hmm.
ball. If we did not, let's just say we only had the one slot moving forward,
Mm-hmm.
she's comfortable with that? If it was to remain just that one?
We're comfortable with it. I think the challenge is by law, obviously, if you hire somebody and you offer them a position that's benefits eligible, we must provide them what we would generally provide any employee. So as long as all the appointing authorities are in communication before they do something, make a change, hire somebody, I think that there's a opportunity for her to pause the process, check in with you all. If you were going to make a change that required an adjustment in that line item, we have to go back to town meeting.
Yeah, okay.
So I think that's the caveat, right? As long as everybody's communicating and keeping her office involved in the process, we should be able to manage that. But it is tighter than we like to be. But I don't think anybody anticipated the trust adjusting premiums by the rates that we saw this year. So I think she's acknowledging that there's a lot of increase already in this number, but a lot of it just is going to that premium adjustment.
Okay.
And just to add, I talked about the firefighter one, but the other one that I'd clarified, it does not contemplate an overlap of the principal assessor and a benefited
Correct.
new employee for the overlap period.
Correct.
It only anticipates one benefited position for the year,
Oh, okay.
not the extra 3 months, I think, is incorporated in the budget of
Correct.
2 benefited employees.
Okay.
It's a small amount, you know, I mean, it's 25% of normal, but
Right.
But
that's
still,
not in there.
if we move forward with the fire position, there goes our one slot, and then we're down to, and then we don't have a slot for that position.
Potentially.
Or we don't have
Yeah.
maybe a gap coverage there,
Okay.
depending on average plan take.
Correct.
Do we need to increase that to
Guess I'm,
at 1.5 at least? I mean, I'm not really comfortable with one,
Yeah.
knowing there's a chance we already have it tagged, so.
I feel like we, in prior years, when we've actually talked about this in depth, there's been at least like 3 above and beyond, either at max or at average, somewhere in there. I don't know. I don't recall what max is, if it's closer to 30 or if it was just over 20, but average I think is just under 20. So yeah, I mean, I bring this up to say I'm not comfortable with it. And if we do decide to incorporate the firefighter position, I'm definitely not comfortable with it being enough.
Well, I feel like if we're gonna move that, increase it, I would almost say it needs to be increased to 3, because if we incorporate fire, there goes 1. If the assessor's position is successfully hired, we need somebody for that overlap period, so that's in theory 2. And then you're back to not having any, any room, so you add that 1 more, and it sounds like we'll be down to 1 pretty quick, depending on what we do, so I almost say we need to budget for 3.
But there's other thoughts, I'm just gonna,
Yeah, I have,
just north of 56, if we do 3 average, whether that's on top of what's there or 2 more, whatever, but.
it was said earlier, and I got twisted around and running all the numbers in my head and reviewing different things. I want to make sure I'm still remembering it correctly. The number of slots that are currently embedded into the request are inclusive of all vacancies that are projected to be hired for.
Yeah, that are positions in the
That are
26.
positions that
in the
everybody's
26
looking
budget.
is looking to hire. There's availability to hire
At
They're
average,
At average.
they're included at average rate if they don't already, if they're not already on or declined to plan and hired, with, the caveat not including the firefighter.
Can I just add one more
And there's
conditional?
one capacity beyond. Yes,
To my understanding, it also assumes that people aren't changing their plans.
right. There's no
So if
change
you're-
capacity.
If you're already in, that is the plan that's being budgeted for. So
Correct.
if you have a life event and that changes, there would
Or
be a
if you're out
capacity.
and then you
Yeah.
choose to enroll, that's not in there either.
Right.
Well, and that's usually why we have between 3 and 5
Because
full
things
Right.
change.
for those.
Things change.
It's not just new; it's changes.
Right.
The reason I ask is, and I'm also looking at those vacancies and saying, how long have they been there, and is there what's the likelihood that they will get filled? We went an entire year with some of those not getting filled, and that showed in our surplus of what we saw.
That's
as,
exactly, yeah.
So
So I can give you a direction on that if you want.
Uh,
Almost all of them are filled.
Yeah.
okay.
And I
getting
would
there.
say, based on my question on which ones they were, I believe I anticipated they'll all get filled.
Okay.
Would you agree?
Yep.
I mean, yeah, based on what's in there, I'd be surprised if any of them stay open for much of the
longer.
year.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, for FY24, that was an absolute issue. FY25,
Has
there's been
been-
progress throughout the year.
Okay.
So
So then I would say at a minimum, we budget for 3.
More than what's in there now.
Yes.
So, I mean, just for easy numbers, I'd say we put another 60 in there for benefits. And if we end up choosing to include the firefighter, we may want to go more.
One of the things I was
It'll
gonna
still
say
give
is-
us the 60 because there's one, but be tight.
It's funny, because I was gonna say, do we want to decide on 2 numbers, one with the firefighter, one without?
Firefighter is listed at 57, is that correct?
Correct.
Do we just maybe say it's 75 and we can split that up if we choose to incorporate it at 75? It's about 18, I think, for, yeah, that'll leave about 18 to go to benefits and 57 for his budget. So if we just, from a, determining if we want to incorporate it and can afford,
Just know
if we
that
take
it's-
75 as the number to add that position. That
Sure.
incorporates.
That gives you the bottom line.
Yeah, for the bottom line, we can split it up where it goes, but. Okay. Um, The other topic was around the overlay balance and the liability there, and regardless of when it gets paid or if or how, where are we at versus that liability and overlay? And I have those answers, and so we have that data. Did you put that in here? I'm trying to miss it. If you did,
it's
you
not in the
did, right?
packet, no.
Hmm?
No.
Okay, that's fine. I will pull it up. I didn't remember if you had.
Brian, while they're looking that up, is there a quick way around this Microsoft Authenticator app stuff to get into my email? That apparently I've skipped too many times and it won't let me go. I'm gonna say, okay, no, there is not. I'll just keep using my phone.
No,
We're good.
no, I can take care of it for you in a moment. When I'm done looking it up, I'll fix it.
I'll refer you to IT.
I was trying not to be that
Someone might
disruptive
wanna-
during the meeting, but
It's not there authenticated again. We'll get it done here in a second.
Had to know that was coming from somewhere.
There we go. That's what I'm looking for. What's that?
So you had to know that comment was
I
coming
was
from
100%
somewhere.
expecting it before it even came up. Okay, so overall, estimated again because it changes a little, and abatements aren't complete for the fiscal year, if I follow correctly. Again, I'm reading from notes here, until April, so there could be some more, exemptions that are coming in. But currently, we have. Thank you. Oh wait, where did that go? Oh geez. I can give you more statistics if it's helpful, but there's like the average that we normally pay out every year, and then like the balance we have so far, and so all of those things can be deductions from our balance. So approximately $2.27 million in overlay for a rough number currently, with some, still some potential small exemptions there as well. So whether that's 2.2 or 2.15, 2.1, somewhere in there. And then I tried to understand kind of what's the requirements, because there's some minimums we have to have every year. We talked about this a lot at length last year, and what has to be in there. We have to cover the deficit, what they would determine to be a deficit, and so I got some clarity on how that's calculated. Well, I guess I didn't say that right, but oh my goodness, those numbers are so close. Okay, so approximately the ATB case decisions are 2.37 million. So I'm going to start over on my numbers because I misread that a little bit. So without interest or anything, but the decisions are about 237. Our balance to start this year in overlay was about 236. Since then, with abatements that are outstanding, others that are anticipated, et cetera, we expect about 100,000 additional deduction, if you will, either paid out or liabilities. So in addition to the 237, there's about 100 more of anticipated requirements to pay out. So we're about 100,000 short. As it stands, we think.
Before we put in the 200?
Before we put anything in there, like just close the fiscal year out, the calculation for overlay would be a deficit anticipated. Again, these are just rough numbers and guesses, but be about 100 short, and that doesn't also deal with the fact that you have to have some in there for next year for future ones, which I think has to be done approximately at least on your 5-year average rate, which has been around 50, plus or minus 50,000. So that gets us in the 150 range. So I think there had been an earlier comment last meeting, reducing from 200 might be okay. I don't think, based on these numbers, that makes sense. I think it's pretty tight at 200 as it is. And that doesn't cover the interest piece. That is not considered part of the overlay deficit because it can be paid in other ways.
Okay.
So the accrued interest piece can be paid in other ways, and so it's not required to be in the overlay. But it's a liability out there should we pay it whatever time that is. So long-winded, I think if we put 200 in there, we may have just covered the minimum that we really need to show with a very small cushion.
Very small.
Questions that I can answer on that?
So 200 kind of just ekes us by. But what was, do we know? I don't remember what we deposited last year, but then they also take any RNA that's left on the table. So do we know what that number was last year? That they were able to also pick up on top of their deposit, so to speak?
We can look it up. It's in the 236 or 237 balance that we started the year with, right? I think. Again, don't hold the assessor responsible for any miscommunication that I just shared, because I am relaying. So, just to that caveat.
Do you recall what we budgeted in your initial plan last year? I think I started at 200. I can't remember where we
But
ended.
that's not where we
I was
ended.
gonna
I want to say, was it
did we dro-
100?
Was it 100 or 150?
We cut it pretty good, I thought. I want to say 100.
According to the recap sheet, the final amount was 261,444.
Did you just pull that? Okay. And there's no draft in the recap, right? It's only the final. Doesn't
Yeah,
have
they
the
don't.
proposed and then the.
Of course, see our notes. Yeah.
Because I know it changed. Obviously,
Yes.
it changes when they finalize it.
It was 260,
261,
261,
444.
44.
So, and I haven't really touched on it yet much, the new growth that was identified and they kind of got brought to light to the assessors finally. There could be a tiny amount more, and again, when everything gets finalized, it could end up with some surplus like it did last year. That is an opportunity to increase that overlay deposit, as you noted. But, I mean, what I know of or what was discussed is, less than 10,000 or something. It's not a big number, so I didn't feel that new growth. The other pieces were large enough to really move the needle on what we're worrying about for balancing the budget, but there's a little bit there most likely. I have the notes when it was an item to discuss, but I don't have what the numbers were. Oh, hang on, there we go. 261 left 13,000 of unspent levy, I believe, last year. Is that what you saw in the tax recap? So we didn't fully max it out, that left 13,000 behind. It doesn't say what we originally had budgeted here, though.
Was it 90? I feel like it was a weird.
We've been somewhere there.
Like,
We all
find our
spent a fair amount of
draft.
time over a few meetings on that.
Yeah.
Here we go. FY25 operating budget final for town meeting. That should have it. $90. So it was 170,000 higher than the budgeted.
Yeah.
And who knows? All I would say is the tighter we budget every time, potentially the less they'll be in that bucket when the final numbers are done. Are you leaning to 200 is not enough?
No, I'm leaning towards leaving it at 200 because they're going to pick up what's left. And
That's
so
correct.
depending on what's left, it could be,
Significant.
right, last year it was 170, so.
Is this an overlay? I apologize for being late.
This is overlay, yes. Overlay timing. Yeah, welcome. So for the record, we have a quorum of FinCom at 7:45. Was discussing where it is, where our potential liability brings us in terms of a deficit. Principal assessor had provided that data based on the ATB decisions and, excluding the interest because that doesn't calculate there. So just trying to make sure, is 200 enough, too little, too much? Is there room there. I think at the moment it's just enough without dealing with the interest.
I want to just ask when it's appropriate, since you're on overlay and I happen to coincidentally walk in, I apologize again for being late. Is there a time when it might be discussed about veterans, or did you already discuss that goes into overlay or comes out of overlay?
We did not discuss it yet.
Okay.
I don't know that we, I don't recollect that we were necessarily going to, because we didn't have any decision from anyone, and I think we had said no ads or no new articles on the ATM if they weren't submitted by last time, so I don't think at this point we would be looking at adding them for the ATM. It doesn't mean we won't add something potentially for an STM, but I think at this point we're holding at what we have because we do need to finalize it.
I simply ask, because if/when that comes up, I just recuse myself from everything and have a separate comment.
Understood. No,
Okay.
I recall you had asked, so if we do, we'll,
Okay, thank you.
yep, absolutely. I was going to something else and I lost my train of thought. That. Here it is. Just for reference, since we're talking about the numbers, just anticipating the accrued interest through June 30 as a separate liability. Again, it's not one that we have to afford or fund this way, but just to know it's out there would be about $675,000 on top of the 237 that we already noted. So again, depends if we end up going there, paying it, when we pay it, all those things, but that anticipates through June 30 of 2025.
And that was
72,542 approximately. And again, that doesn't have to be out of overlay, nor do we have to incorporate that in our minimum balance in overlay. I believe it can be paid from there, but it doesn't need to be.
interesting.
Did I miss any of the other open items from last review that we needed answers to? Or wanted answers to?
Any open items in general? Is that what you're asking for?
I mean, yeah, related to questions about balancing the budget or the budget amounts or open questions that we had to answer on the budget. I think or decisions about it. ACO is another one that we didn't come back to. We don't have any more data that I know of, so it's kind of don't think that's gone anywhere. At this point, it is what it is.
I was just looking at, just trying to get capture of all of the changes and where it puts us in as a final number.
Of what we just discussed?
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what we're layering in, right?
That's, yeah, like all the
yeah.
potential layers that I started to write them down. I just wanted to make sure I didn't miss any.
Well, what I had for notes so far, obviously with the new growth, we had a surplus 106. The other item that we didn't address taking out of the 106, but I wanted to come back to is that starting depositing some RNA into capital to start that process, which we discussed last meeting
Yes,
extensively.
Um,
And then I have, did you have something different?
I was just gonna say, and I'm sorry if I missed it, I know Brian ran over some things at the beginning. We're adjusting part-time police department wages, I don't know if that was factored in.
It's in there.
It is.
Okay. And we were waiting to hear back from Chief in regards to potential academy changes of costs and whether he'd be able to absorb those if the change did happen.
They did respond to that.
Yep.
Yeah, didn't it go to, was it like 20 something to about 6,000?
That's
that again?
the governor's proposal.
About about a
Yeah,
$3,000.
they're
And then go from roughly 3 to 6.
And we haven't seen what Ways and Means and neither the House or Senate are contemplating yet. So he did acknowledge that there's enough in the $10,000 budget to really handle one. If that was to be an increase, he would have to pull it from somewhere else in his budget. So overexpend one line item and underspend somewhere else.
Okay.
And I think the other piece was the cadet would be the other, one potentially. And obviously there's a hope that maybe we are able to hire without having to send to training, and then
Right.
that can be used just for the cadet.
Right.
Also, depending on when a cadet might be hired, there may be some capacity there
Right.
in the cadet
Right.
funding.
If it's later in the year,
later in the
you've got-
year.
yep.
So a lot of moving parts to it if the increase goes into place.
Right.
And given that it's a $3,000 difference, I mean, it doesn't take long. If it's a delay on hiring the cadet, it doesn't take long to build up that surplus.
No, on the flip side, probably maybe I don't even want to say worst case, but the other kind of more costly side of it could be 9,000 because it could be 2 at full at 6 versus 1 at 3 that's incorporated. So
Yep.
there's maybe a 9,000 swing there.
Got
Again, our reserve fund is larger to try to help incorporate some of these things that may come up we don't anticipate. So it's not a massive chunk of that if that's where we ended up in my thought process.
And it doesn't necessarily affect the budgeting process. I know we jumped around with all kinds of numbers. I have down that Pete was gonna get back to us on to what percentage he would recommend for opening stabilization accounts. I have
That's
down
true.
50, 75. all
That's
kinds
true.
of
That's
numbers,
true.
so-
That's probably more on the ATM side. So
Yes,
I'll wait
yeah,
to come back to
which
that.
is why I was going over it.
Yep.
So I have, the only other outstanding question was the assessor's overlap.
Right. Dan, since you're here, just if you happen to know, I don't know if you got a response. The budget incorporated a 12-week overlap between the new assessing position and the current staff member. And there was a question last time on whether that was appropriate, or would it be 8, or what is needed, if there was a decision from the assessors yet on whether that was extra or if that was necessary.
I don't have anything. It depends greatly on who gets hired and the level of what training they need or competence they already have. We don't know. So I don't know when we'll have an answer on that. I think Jackie put that in as a placeholder, thinking that would be a reasonable time. There's limited pool to draw from, is my understanding, and we don't know who's going to apply. Set up a committee to look at them, whoever it might be. Might know better in a month. I don't know. I don't think we'll know better in time for this purpose. I know they've been in contact with Brian about it too, so I think I'm accurate here.
Yeah, everything's been sent back to your office a week and a half ago to get ready for your review and finalization. So whenever that's done, we can launch the search.
So nothing at the moment. No change at the moment.
No.
Okay. So kind of back to the tally piece, with the 106 surplus at the moment, we have the interest in funding some capital stabilization from RNA, plus 60 for benefits, plus 75 if we add the additional fire department position, minus 73 if we adjust secondary to FY24 actual, and then flexibility in the FY26 funding or first half funding on the fire truck down from 450, and on the cemetery, I don't know what to call it, initial stages funding, probably some of the next steps, engineering, design, permitting before going out to bid at 200. Does that come down and or move into just from the borrowing authority? So our flexibility is there. I think that was all the ones contemplated tonight. Did I miss any?
That sounds about right.
Yep.
Okay.
I do have a question about the hire for the fire department.
Yep.
And I may be misremembering this. When we initially started the process, we had to have a certain amount of firefighters. Has that gone up? If this goes into effect, would this have gone up twice since then? Or is this still talking about the one that we were looking to add from before that we never added?
Correct. When you
Okay.
say from before, you're not saying when we first went full-time, you're talking about like last fiscal year when the
No, when we-
override, or like
when we-
the very original proposal?
When the very original proposal, when we decided we needed a certain amount of firefighters.
Okay.
I know that we've been talking about adding a firefighter. I'm just wondering, because it's not triggering to me, whether we added one and now this is adding another one. This is just the adding one.
Correct.
Okay.
I believe the original proposal was a chief and two full-time, and that's
Yep.
what we have.
Okay.
And
All
that's
right.
what we've had. This additional and the 2 in, 2 out guidance, it's always been there, but being a little more formal now, has been something I think that's been brought to us for about 2 or so years.
I remember
It was something we
hearing
contemplated in
about it.
the override
Yep.
proposals, and then he brought it back this year
Okay.
in the narrative, so.
Thank you.
So it's all the same, one more
Yeah.
from where we started. And to that discussion a little bit, I talked with Chief about some of the concerns raised in the discussion last meeting about staff, splitting their time across stations, various different things that were in the original proposal to move to having some full-time, and where we are today, and that the deviation between the two, and revisiting that. So I don't have any answers or any kind of thing that, I'm not going to bring that on his behalf, but I did discuss with him setting up a time with the board and FinCom or whoever else would like to join to kind of, let's walk through that. Let's walk through what the initial proposal was, where we have varied from that now that we've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. And what are the drivers, and kind of looking forward, what do we want to see shift or how, and to kind of revisit that, regardless of whether we fund this position. I think that needs to get done so that we come in alignment on where we are and what that gets us, and how we want to do things in the future. And he's welcome to do it. He's like, next meeting, I said, we've got too much already, so soon, but not yet. For what that's worth. Other questions, other items? No. Okay. We also had the updated balances. I think those got sent out, right, for the stabilization funds and such. Did you all get those?
I think the treasurer sent it today.
Did she? Oh, I thought she sent them a week ago. Maybe these are new ones or different ones. Or maybe I'm confusing it. Different email. Okay. Just for references, obviously, it's not. And then there's the free cash piece. So is there any questions on the free cash data? Any more? Anything there of significance that anyone had? I think I just wanted to call out, because this is the end of FY24, so obviously it's a while back, but our revenues kind of to the point that the 90 became 261, and some of those other pieces, our revenues were 370,000 higher than we had budgeted. Some was taxes, some was licenses and fees and excise and things like that, but the biggest one was the interest on investments, which was 172,000 higher than we had budgeted back in FY24. So, and that was before the 4% rate, or only about a quarter of it was in there. We got like 230,000 in interest revenue. We had only budgeted 60 back in FY24. obviously it's even higher this year, what we'll end up with. I don't know if there's any other specific kind of call-outs or items. Obviously, the less expenditures, a lot of that was driven by staffing or lack of filling staff positions. I don't know if I found it when I was looking through the 430,000 excess from education overall. How much of that was secondary versus primary? I might have missed it. That was my only other open item, just kind of one of the things that supports, I think, supports the secondary adjustment. Well, actually, I guess I just said it, didn't I? Because it's in our budget numbers. It was 147 or 147 something. It was only 12, so half of it was secondary. The actuals versus budget for secondary in FY24 was almost $200,000 difference.
Right. and
So
we're-
there's
and we're only
about half
looking
of the 430
at- Right, and we're only looking to drop it about 73.
from the request,
From the
because the
request.
request is lower already.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So disregard, I guess roundabout, we already had that answer, I just didn't put the
Yeah.
math together.
I had a couple of,
A lot of numbers flying around.
I know, I'm trying
Trying
not
to
to
catch
get
and
too
absorb
buried in
them all.
them, I know.
Brian, on that document you sent us.
Which one?
What's the
Let me
title on the
find
page,
a title
if
for
you-
you. Town of Irving, Massachusetts combining statement of special revenue, fund revenues, expenditures, and change in fund balances.
She calls that the annual report. Let me pull it back up.
That's the one I was reading the revenues, oh no, it's not.
Yes, I got it.
Can you, anything with line item that starts with 250, is that school? I can't tell you what I'm on. Yeah, I can't really tell you what page number I'm on.
In our packet, it's
Ooh.
49 out
Oh.
of 217.
Oh, yeah.
It's the one where it starts
you
with
ask if
fund
it's a
numbers
200
200,
what?
210, 250.
Yes, yep.
Yeah,
What were you asking?
Oh, no,
not all of them.
no.
What was
Okay.
the question, I'm sorry?
So I was looking at this to try and figure out where some free cash was generated from. And one of the lines that caught my attention was, it's line 250-3023 for food service.
So that
So these
is
are
a school
all-
line.
Okay,
But all of these are
Special
funds
funds.
and receipts that we get in, they are not expenditures.
So the 250s
Like
are
grants and
revolving
receipts.
funds.
yep, okay.
260s are gift funds. 270s are state grants. 280s are federal grants. 290s are private grants.
Okay,
So if you start with a 3-digit, that's telling you what fund we're in. And
Yeah.
you can see like there's some smaller ones like the 200s and the 210s at the very
Yeah.
top of that list. So those are different revolving funds that you're looking at.
so that explanation is very helpful, because that would lead me to my next question.
Yep.
So like 270-3245, which is the special education circuit breaker. It was my understanding that they were budgeting circuit breaker into their budget, yet this shows as of June 30, they had $123,000.
You said 270.
245, 30245.
So I don't know if I am not reading
Top
this
of page
correctly or
50.
I'm not following it correctly.
50.
They're budgeting it now. That started last year with the, or was it, you asked them to budget it last year, so it's in place for FY25. This is FY24.
Okay,
So I don't know how much was budgeted that year,
okay.
but you're reading it correctly. That's telling you that its ending balance was 123,570. That's correct.
And so, is that money that is left on the table and disappears, or is that
No.
money that sticks around
So
and it just
these
flows to
funds
next
hold
year?
their own balances.
Okay,
They don't close at the end of the year unless they're a grant with a contractual requirement.
okay,
So they all
Each one-
revolve in theory and may get funds unless they have an end date.
Or certain enabling statutory legislation. So
okay,
circuit breaker
I was
has a
gonna say that.
3-year rolling average.
yeah,
So it looks at what your education eligible special education costs were in the preceding 3 years. There's a 3-year average. If that balance goes over, that additional capacity goes to the general fund.
okay. As long as it's not money that's getting left on the table. That's
No,
It
Okay.
goes to our general fund, it
Correct.
doesn't not come in, we still get it?
It's already on the books, correct?
Okay, but
Yep.
the amount that we get allocated doesn't get affected by them carrying the balance? It's
No.
just excess would end up in the general fund?
What you're eligible for every year changes on a multitude of factors, and the superintendent's office has to do several reports to help calculate that. What they require as we're closing the books, so when Debbie starts her process in July, she'll look at that 3-year rolling average. She'll look at what the current balance is as of FY24. If there's anything over than that, she'll make a journal entry for June 30 that moves that excess into the general fund.
Okay.
Which
But-
is why we had that conversation with the school, that we'd much rather you program that money to be used.
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
don't need it, and we don't want to. So-
Okay.
Does, but the balance is in there, and whether we roll any to the general fund does not in the calculation
Correct.
of what we receive every year?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't get penalized for that.
Well, that's my,
Yeah. The
when
fear
you
is
said
if they
general
don't-
fund, I was
yeah.
like, oh, wow, okay, and
Yeah.
not redistributed somewhere else? That's
No,
great.
and the ask was,
But-
and exactly what the superintendent is doing is using it up front instead of letting it not get used. We have to put more RNA into the budget, and then have that plus any RNA unexpended all roll into general fund. It just created a mess. Whereas
Yeah.
now they're budgeting it and saying we're going to use some of this. We get it every year. Let's figure out how much we can embed into our budget so that we can
Right.
decrease the RNA, get a better handle on what's going to free
Right.
cash. So that's
Well, and there was a there was a previous understanding. I don't know what the context was around that previous understanding, where there was an assumption that the school thought they had to do it the way you just described, that we wanted to have excess free
Yeah.
cash coming out of the circuit breaker account. And I think you all have made it abundantly clear that that is not what you're asking for
No.
or expecting. So I think we now have everybody on the same page. But yes, you described it well.
That was another one of the elementary school, just level funding, because the numbers in there are very small. I think they came, it's not, it's like, just level fund it.
it's-
Take it.
it's
I'm gonna
pennies-
be
it's
frank,
pennies
take a
over.
win and just give us a level funded budget. The excess is there, clearly, based on the, regardless of staffing and all of that, I mean, it's not very much money.
I think it was what, like 12,000?
10, 12,000, yeah, it's very small.
23.
23,000.
I wasn't sure of the
23,
number. I knew it was
yeah.
close.
It's not even 100. It's not a big number. So again, just
I look at it the other ways. I'm okay with that. We have the win. That it's I mean, it's not even a percentage. It's not even a full point.
It's not, but it's frustrating every year that we give out guidance and we say we expect level funding, and here we're already doing the give me's of don't level fund your salaries, and we understand that electric, oil, and all that goes up. So if you have to fund more for that, that's fine. Everything else has to be level funded. And to me, it's frustrating year after year sitting here and still having departments not following that guidance. And then you have departments who follow it to a T, and departments that kind of do it, and departments that don't do it at all. And it leads to animosity. There are departments who did it above and beyond, and then, there are departments who don't do it, and we don't hold anyone accountable. So we're not going to hold those people accountable and those departments accountable and say, we asked for level funding, we expect level funding. What is the point of us issuing guidance and doing all that work? Because we're not holding anyone accountable. And our budget is getting tighter and tighter and tighter. I mean, last year was the budget season that lasted 2 years, it felt like. So at some point we have to start, it sucks to be the bad guy. But at some point I think we do have to say, we can't, you have guidance for a reason, and you were told that these are the parameters you need to follow, and so this is what you need to follow. And if you're turning back that much every year, you don't prove to me beyond a reasonable doubt why you can't function without that increase that you're asking. And that isn't just specific to the school, that's to everyone who didn't do what our guidance that requested.
Were you gonna talk?
I just wanted to revisit the school's explanation of where that came from, and that was largely attributed to salary increases.
It's $18,000 in maintenance expenses.
There was the $18,000 maintenance expenses, you're right, but there was a $142,000 increase in instruction. There was an offset somewhere else that
Yep.
sort of netted the two. So I just want to, in the grand scheme of things, in a $3 million budget, I do think a lot of your guidance was included in this budget proposal, maybe not in past years, but I do just at least want to be honest about what was presented to us.
Correct, but it wasn't, I appreciate and I respect that they added where they needed to add, but they also didn't not add other things. And it's not, I'm not calling them out in particular, they're not the only budget, so.
Agreed.
I'm trying to be very fair and say it is not, it's not just one department in particular.
It was just, I know we differ in opinion to some degree, that we wouldn't start giving a level budget starting in 1950, would be in great shape. But we have to get along with the times, and we've asked people to submit a level budget where you possibly can, and then give us a narrative. If you can't, convince us why you need what you need. And I think most places did that. And it's not like apples and oranges, it's more like fruit salads. You've got some departments where, well, do they get their $1,000 this year or not? In other departments, do you get your couple $1 million this year or not? And there's a lot of moving parts, a lot more moving parts in some budgets than there are in others. And there's a lot of room for shuffling around. I don't disagree that perhaps people can do a better job, but I think they came to us with, here's the closest we can come to level budget, and here's our explanation and narrative of why we need something else. I think we need to be sensitive to that, having that option there for people. At the same time, being sensitive to taxpayers are paying the bill. I just don't think we can be as rigid as some
Just
might
to
like
clarify though, I agree with what you just said, which was, we said put it in your narrative. The problem is, they put it in their budget, and it's not just the school. I think the assessors have it. The library does not. They put everything in the narrative and level funded, and said, I won't be able to do these things without it.
Yeah.
Which might have even gone a little further than we meant, because there were some things that we did put caveats that you could include and be over. So I think we had some that followed it maybe even further than we meant it, and we had others who didn't even follow it. So, I mean, I agree with that, that we have positions in here that we almost didn't even talk about because we had issues reading the narratives, but they followed the instructions. And they put them where they were supposed to, so they weren't in the budget. And we have others that just incorporated funding for positions or overlap or these things. That was not the guidance. It was, do not put them in there. So, because it's apples, because it is fruit salad, but if we don't have all the staffing in the narratives but not in the budget to compare to each other, then we aren't making a fair comparison on where are we making conscious decisions to spend money on staffing, for example. And I'm just picking different pieces of this to it's not picking on any one department, right? It's all the different pieces here.
I see your point.
For me, as Jim said a little bit ago, a lot of numbers flying around. It's hard enough because of that to not have the things in the buckets we asked for, so that we can do as close to a like for like comparison on where we're going to spend additionally and where we're going to cut. It's difficult, I think. I'm also struggled, but we don't have to solve that one tonight, but the difference between like the numbers in the narrative and the numbers in the budget proposal, and like there's no grant funding shown in the narrative one, and there's only a $10,000 increase, and then I know they've reduced it since, but suddenly we do have an increase, so something doesn't jive for me with their numbers, but I'm not going to solve that tonight for sure. So I guess unless there's others that we didn't cover, we do need to make some decisions on what we are and aren't doing, and if we're balanced from there. So Dan, now that you're here, I'm going to circle back to one that we started on a little bit in the beginning, but it affects the budget. So discussion of the FY26 base wage adjustment for non-union employees. So we had a placeholder to 2% in what we have currently for the proposed budget. The question first was, is there any discussion about increasing that, or are we satisfied with it at 2? And then if we are, we need to make a motion and vote to adjust the wage tables formally for FY26, pending approval of funding, obviously. So, any discussion on anything other than that?
Where does that leave us? I apologize for not being able to be here on time. Where does that leave us with either a deficit of the whole budget or an overage of the whole budget, figuring it's that 2% placeholder.
It's in the numbers that we have to start tonight. It includes the 2%.
Okay?
And with all the numbers and everything we just discussed, with the new growth and stuff, we have a surplus, but then with the things that we've identified that we may want to add in, it depends on what we decide to do.
Okay.
Because we have a variety of different ways to get to, at least as I see it, we have ways to get to balance today, even if we do some of these expenses or all of them.
Yeah.
It's just making those choices.
Yeah, I've run some numbers too.
Any, does anybody, any discussion on 2%? Good with 2%? Does anyone want to make a motion?
Motion to change the wage tables for a base wage adjustment of an increase of 2% across all tables
For FY '26.
for FY '26. Thank you.
Pending funding approval.
Pending
Second.
funding approval.
Or maybe not.
No.
No?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
That's
That's
fine.
not my motion.
That's fine.
Just FY '26.
Okay.
Second that.
Any other discussion?
I do have just a comment of discussion, it won't take long. When inflation was going from practically nothing to 9% or whatever it was, I was very much in favor of giving people more raises to keep up with what's going on. Cost of milk and everything was going up, gas for everybody. Now the inflation is not raging as it was. Don't know where it's gonna go yet, but it's not as bad as it was. And seems like 2% is reasonable to the people getting paid and reasonable to the taxpayers paying the bill. Neither one might agree, but that seems reasonable to me.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So that's set 2%, 26 wage tables for non-union.
Right, that's the understanding, non-union.
Correct.
Correct. That was the
Yeah, we don't have
motion
authority to
and-
change.
No, no,
Somebody
those
put
agreements are
union contracts.
set as is. Okay, so that closes that one out. Maybe one by one, I'll go through the secondary, adjusting it down to the same as actual spend in FY '24 of approximately 1.288 million. Is that a yes?
Yes.
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 So you're asking the school to give another 23,000? Did
No,
we ask?
secondary, so secondary,
Secondary, okay.
Secondary, we historically have
Okay.
been between $100,000 and $200,000
Is what it
overage. Yeah, the explanation I gave when I made that suggestion was Turner's Falls High School does their assessment based on future projected enrollment, not based on historical, like the tech school does. And typically, they have to anticipate every single eligible student will opt to go to Turner's Falls, unless they know that somebody has committed to go through school choice or application somewhere else. So and that never plays out when it's 100% that ends up there.
and I feel like for a few years, maybe earlier on when I was on the board and before that in the finance committee, we had kind of moved to we'll fund actual of last year. And then if we have to have a fall special, once free cash is certified and make an adjustment because actuals are higher, we would. It seems like at some point, probably just didn't realize we were deviating away from that. And so that was one of the reasons why I'd recommend going back to it. It's something that either plan for it and then don't need it, or we plan what we do know and think we know and can adjust later. We have that capacity, so I don't think we'll have a problem having free cash for that small amount that it might be.
So the request is to adjust it down to, what's the number again?
Do you want the exact number?
Or just
Approximately 1.288 million.
And you said this is for secondary?
That's just secondary, yeah.
Okay.
Benefits, plus 60.
Yes.
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 Okay. Additional firefighter position, plus 75,
Yes.
partly benefits. I can ask for a vote if we're a little unsure. Or,
That was 75K we were putting in for that.
yeah, it would be split between benefits and
Yep.
their budget, yep, but total.
I think in the essence of seeing the big picture, maybe keep going down the list that you have about also, because there was also cap stabilization.
So yeah,
And then
that's fine.
funding
Yep,
sources
we'll come
too,
back to it.
'cause
Yep, that's
it's
totally
one
fine.
big picture instead of just
Totally fine. So, the net of the, so far we have benefits in secondary, and the net of that is a 13K decrease of those two changes. The other one was a RNA deposit into capital stabilization to start setting an amount. There was a lot of discussions last meeting. I don't recall if any of them landed on some minimum amount or some preference or,
they did not.
so,
There was just a lot of numbers.
and there was
Yeah.
negative capacity at that point, so obviously that made it harder. It doesn't mean we couldn't carve it out. We could also help carve it out by decreasing some of the upfront cash for a couple of projects. So there's different ways to get, well, that's not true, those are all from free cash.
Right.
So that doesn't work, but out of the surplus right now, there's some capacity, which is at about 119, 120 with what we've done so far. Because we had 106. And we're adding 13 so far.
That's it. I mean, ideally, I'd love to say capital takes it all, but
Ideally, I would like to disagree.
of course you would. What would a meeting be without you and I getting into it?
No,
I mean,
I agree in principle. I said it last time. I think there should be a placeholder, and I think going forward, things like this that we want to create known costs, like we did a placeholder for the base wage adjustment. These placeholders for what we're anticipating that the want would be year over year to go into it should be baked in very early, and not at the end. And then you see where it fleshes out, and then you can adjust
absolutely.
accordingly. So I 100% do agree with you on the line item. It's unfortunate that we're in a spot where we're doing this at the very end,
Yeah,
and not
agreed.
in the beginning when we're setting out, the budget requests, and we already know what the line holders, the placeholders would be. So just throwing that out there. I have one other question related to this.
Please?
Remind me so I don't have to scroll through. Brian, I'm sure you have it at the top of your head. The fire truck
Mhm.
funding source for the 450 was RNA?
No, it was
No.
capital
It was all
stabilization.
capital stabilization.
Yeah,
And all of the deposit currently into capital is free cash.
yeah.
Correct.
So adjusting any of the capital stabilization expenditures
Doesn't help us on the
Doesn't.
RNA front.
just changes what we take out, doesn't help with what goes in.
Correct.
Because in turn, really, saying a 450 reducing to 350 would also assume that if we wanted to free up money for something different, we would reduce the free cash deposit as well. Because it's a draw, or,
Well, that's-
you know.
And that's the same with the
can
cemetery, because the
offset,
cemetery
yeah.
is coming from the same funding source.
So either one of those going down might help us balance a budget if we want to do, but it's funded from free cash. It's not by adjusting the free cash deposit. It's not by RNA that's available anywhere for those two items.
Okay.
I'm gonna bring this one up, Brian, because I haven't, but you and I haven't, and I haven't talked with the water superintendent on it either. The stuff that came back most recently from Ty and Bond around PFAS and testing and requirements and the cost of that is not incorporated in this budget for 26.
Part of it is.
Enough, as far as you know?
Well, you all have to make some decisions on how you want to proceed on that.
I understand. Come on up, Pete, since you're here. And again, I know this is off the cuff because we haven't had a chance to get into it. I just, from a high level, do you think there's enough there in the operating budget based on what you've seen in those numbers? Again, we have decisions to make and a lot of other things, but if there isn't, there isn't. We have retained earnings, but I just wanted your gut opinion.
Just straight out of the operating budget?
In the FY26 operating budget for the costs that are going to be in FY26 on that proposal, do you think there's sufficient funding?
He's not talking about wastewater, he's talking about the the landfill.
Like the
whole
maple,
bullet
the
system.
PFAS,
Exactly.
Right.
So you're
the
talking
tie and
about,
bond assessments and testing and,
the chairman's
we get
talking
clued
about
in?
budget 433.
Okay.
okay, let me start over.
So
The water department budget. Am I not? Am I in the wrong one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
No wonder I'm.
Solid waste
exactly.
collection.
That's why
You should
everybody's
say
going.
that to me and
Everybody's
look at me
huh?
like I have no
Yeah.
idea what I'm talking about. 'cause
So,
you're right.
Maple
Then
Avenue
maybe I'm not as
landfill.
concerned.
Maple Avenue landfill.
Right.
You've always, well, for over a decade, you've been doing annual monitoring
Yeah.
out there. This past year, there was a PFAS detection in one of the monitoring wells that initiated an entire study that we had to do. We've been working on it for about a year.
Right.
And we're finally getting to the conclusion of that. But it does require ongoing testing. So there is an increase for ongoing testing. But there's also a question at the end of this fiscal year, which I need to bring to all of you, that we just got back from Time Bond about 2 weeks ago. And it's a
yeah.
question about, do we want to go forward with a proposal to put in a filtration system at the one location where we got a similar hit on the future testing. The other ones came back negative.
Okay.
We were waiting to get results on some additional testing sites that they were doing, and we haven't gotten those back
We
yet.
haven't gotten those back.
I think they'll be back soon. So that's what the chairman's referring to. We have this new proposal. It talks about a little bit in FY25 and then what to do in FY26. On that, I increased in, and I said 433. I forgot that we broke that out to 439. So Department 439 is your landfills. And we had increased that request. Your past appropriations were just over 25,000, and we increased that to 56.7. So we did work in that additional testing into the budget. But again, there's a question about this capital improvement, if we were going to do it. We still have to figure all those pieces out.
Okay.
So that was a long-winded answer to
So-
say, I'm not particularly concerned at this point.
Okay. And yeah, been a long week already. It's Monday, and I'm thinking of it as water, and it's not water. It's wastewater, and the water budget is much smaller. So I just inherently assume a lack of capacity or potential for something large. So
It's general budget and it's landfills. It's not water or wastewater.
I know, and like I said,
It's a long
it
week.
feels like Monday. So I guess disregard. Yes, we got to make some decisions, but
Yes.
it's not going to impact our any concerns about funding FY26 as
Not at
planned.
what
or
we
as
know today.
proposed.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm good. I think I'm good. Anybody else has any questions?
Run while you still can.
Thanks, Pete.
Yep.
Okay. So, capital, but we left off at capital stabilization. Other, anything else, or decisions on that, or recommendations on that? I think at this point, I don't see, well, maybe I'll go to the capital ones, because we talked about the cemetery and the fire truck. I don't see a big difference between leaving them as is or reducing them if it's all coming out of a free cash deposit from an offset standpoint, because we're not looking to balance
gonna
the
change,
budget, and
yeah.
it's not gonna help us
We've never
fund
wanted,
RNA capital in the
Yeah.
future, so.
we've never wanted to balance a budget with free cash.
Correct. And
It's not
it
a
doesn't
good-
help us build a regular deposit,
Correct.
Right.
so we leave them as is.
Leave them as is.
For now.
Okay.
for now.
That sounds loaded.
That means Scott's over here
It's like so
plotting.
loud, sounded loaded over there.
I can hear the numbers churning in his head.
No, there really is no, there's no benefit to changing them unless we're changing our principal philosophy on how we build our budgets.
Yeah.
No, it's not the time to do it.
Okay.
So
I see some furious calculations going
we're
on around
sitting
me
at
here,
what,
but
93, 343?
119 and change. You need to add 13, not subtract it.
Oh, we were plus 13, you're right.
So I got about 119 because we were at 106.
Yeah,
give
we
or
were
take.
one, yep.
Does that include or not include the firefighter?
Does not.
Does not
Does
include,
not.
okay.
And that would be 75 if we're discussing that.
Mm-hmm.
I was just gonna say, why don't we go through everything and
Assuming-
leave the capital RNA deposit till last?
Well,
And see where everything flushes out at the end with that.
I mean, that was the
if
only
we're
other
trying
piece.
to squeeze, if we're trying to squeeze that number a little, I'll go back to the fact that I recommended making it 75. The current benefits before we added 60, which was 3, had potentially enough to cover that with no changes and nothing else.
And it's,
So if we say the plus 60 is for changes and the unexpected, then the before the 60 covered this position.
correct,
Yep.
So it only needs to be 57.
not 75.
We're getting into the tens. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a,
You're
I
making
mean-
me scribble on my
I
notes.
mean,
a lot
now
tonight.
you're talking, we're at 62, 343, if we add that in, right? Because we're at 119, 343, take away the 57.
yep. I'm still, in the back of my mind, in my heart, I'm still trying to find 100 for capital. Out of RNA, honestly. I mean, I felt like it's a starting point, and maybe
I
we
mean,
can
I
add 100
also-
every year or something, but I don't know where we get it from, but that's,
Yeah.
I mean, even the 23 from elementary that I kind of made a comment about, it gets us closer, but we're still off 15. I understand.
What did we
you don't
leave
agree
on
with
the
that.
table last year, about 13
Oh, of capacity?
capacity?
Yeah, but that's not recoverable, but yes.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, it,
Plus 170,000 in additional that was in overlay. So it was really 185-ish more than we
Yeah.
budgeted.
no, I mean, in the onset, at town floor, we knew we were walking in with a 13.
No, that 13 was when we set the tax rate. I don't know that we walked
Oh,
into the
okay.
floor with anything. I think it was pretty
did we have-
negligible, if at all. I don't remember what our projected sheet was, but we were way negative. We were a couple million getting to zero, so I don't think there was much. I feel like that was last year, but they all
was 2
blend
years ago.
together.
I was going to say, that was 2
Oh,
years
God,
ago.
okay. They're blending
It's just the
together.
PTSD.
You had me confused. I wasn't going to
That's fine.
go against you because I couldn't say for certain.
A lot of numbers tonight.
I don't like to argue if I'm not really
You're
sure.
good, you're good.
I too would like to see 100, knowing what we have on the horizon, but we talked about needing to do things differently moving forward. Can we go 50 for this year? And
Anything's better.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
You
was
know,
what I
I know,
thought.
'cause I'm-
Absolutely.
I'm saying, you
And
know,
it's a similar
50
thing that we did
and-
before. We're establishing the line, we're establishing the budget line item and a small amount to go into it. And every year we would hope to increase that amount. You know, that discussion happens early about what do we put for a placeholder next year? You know, what's the step up increase that we think we can absorb and still fund the rest of the budget?
So, again, I mean, it's whatever. We don't have to keep trying to find, 5, 10, 20K to get there, but, I looked at our 24, tax recap, and part of it might have been because of the solar was catching up, but we had the solar and we put that in as not recurring, but it is recurring. So maybe that's another 4 or 5. So, I mean, we can probably piecemeal our way to get closer to 100, but maybe that doesn't make sense to I mean, it's late, we got a lot of business, we got a lot to finish,
Yeah,
so I
and
don't want to
also-
belabor it, I'm just
I also
bringing
think
that
that
out
there
there.
is an opportunity that, when free cash comes around, just like we did this year, that there was a large amount that we're putting in, into it from free cash. And so it's not, I'd hate to get the budget so nickel and dime down to, every $1,000 out of a $20 million, or $15 million budget that we're nickel and diming of one line item of 1,000 here, 1,000 there. Let's get a placeholder, let's get some money in it, let's get it assigned, and then work on the long-range plan of, we know the number has to increase next year and the year after to ensure that we have, the 5, 10, 15, 20-year plan paid for somehow.
Okay. I'm just gonna go back to one last one, which is the interest income. I know we've got a rate now, we negotiated one again, thank you, treasurer. Is that in our 580 on the projections?
Let me get to the right page. So I was assuming 230 in interest income again. I was trying to stay conservative with that, but as you noted before, that may
230
be-
was only a quarter of the higher rate, and it was at lower rates in the past.
So you may have a little give there.
So all I would say is that's our number to say it's bouncing or not. Do we add 50 or whatever it is to get to the 100?
Yeah, it's a decision on whether or not
We think
it's a
there?
risk. It's a risk reward.
Right.
Do we think it's actually going to come in higher, and are we willing to bet on that and put it in there and then assign it somewhere else? If it doesn't, then we have to know that we have to balance that some other way.
Or the tax rate comes a little higher, the total is a little higher. There's a little more new growth. I know there is, but it's 10,000
right,
potentially that isn't incorporated.
right.
So all those little pieces end up.
Yeah. I mean,
That's my last volley for getting it to 100. Then I'm done. If that's a direction we might want to go. Because you said we were where at after the fire? 57? Where?
I have it at 62,343. I mean, you're talking,
You're talking
30,
40?
38, 40,000. If you're,
I don't know. I'll just say I would say we increase our anticipated interest by 40K and put 100 RNA deposit. I mean, the other one, there's OPEB. There's other articles we didn't even touch on that we do fund that I think we need, but those are other places that we could adjust if we had to. But that's mine. If you all don't agree, that's totally fine too, and we'll balance it with 50 and go forward.
Well, it all comes down to risk, and you said you're conservative. How big of a risk do you think you're taking?
I feel better that we have a locked-in rate through March of next year. So you have a 3%
We have
floor locked in.
3/4 of the year.
For 3/4 of the year.
Mhm.
And the 230 actual from 2024, which this is based on
Was
currently,
through June, so 3 months we're at a 4% rate.
and before that they were at an
We
unset
didn't
rate.
we didn't have a set rate prior to
So
that.
it was probably much lower from what I understood. Now, was it lower than 3? I think so, but for hedging.
I can't recall. Right.
We didn't get interest income through at any point this year so far, did we? Didn't
No, I
have that
gave you
anywhere.
at the last meeting through December 31st.
Which was, do you recall? Sorry, that was my only
Yeah.
thought. Is
I
just
was
don't know
not
where it is,
expecting
but
that question.
Again, it's at 4% the whole time.
Is
For
it
half
in
a
the
year,
docs
so-
that Jen just sent over today?
No.
Oh, okay.
Different accounts.
Okay.
Oh, I do remember that. Some of the,
This is for calendar year.
for the
And
whole
there's-
year, calendar year?
Calendar year.
That's okay. That'll give us 3/4 of 4%.
So on the primary account, the interest was 270. There's a few other smaller accounts.
Sure.
The primary was 270.
So that was 270. 3/4 of that time was at 4% on the primary account. and we're saying we know it'll at least be
3%.
3% for 3/4. And that's the primary, it's not all, but. So. Sounds like north of 200 easily. I don't know how much the other ones contribute roughly, but it's not a ton, but. So we'll make it quick. Yes or no? Increase the interest income and do 100 deposit. Yes, no? Yes?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
What do you have to say?
I'm asking. It's capital, it's gonna fund capital. I mean, it's all of us are impact, you know, it's, I mean, we're all impacted when we pay our taxes too, right? This is all of us.
Yeah, maybe more. I'd take more in interest.
Now you're gonna get into an area that I don't wanna go that far on the risk. I think we're conservative in general, but I don't think it makes sense to be riskier right now.
I'm only willing to be riskier than I was an hour ago because I know.
So that sounds like
I work for a
the,
bank. I'm supposed to be conservative.
you're risk
I just-
adverse, but
I
investment
know-
heavy.
I know what we have to prepare for on the horizon and what we're gonna have to lay out there.
So when I got out of that, consensus was, it's the 580 number in our revenue, right? That's where the interest is buried, so we'll make that 630. And add a 100,000 RNA deposit into capital stabilization.
630.
The line in our revenue
620.
account,
That was increasing it by 40,000.
oh, you're right, you are.
Yeah.
I'm glad you know math better than me.
Well,
It's getting late.
Yes. Okay.
620,
Yes.
100 into RNA,
Yes.
leaves a couple $1,000s of more.
Correct.
Good, balanced.
Okay.
Includes a firefighter.
Yep.
Includes 60 more in the benefits.
Yep.
Includes reducing secondary. Increase the revenues, and that's it.
And just in case somebody, just one of the 10,000 just logged in now to hear that, it's reducing secondary knowing that when free cash is certified, if there is a
Right.
need to fill that gap, we have the means to do it.
And we are committed to having that special town meeting and-
Always.
and funding. as
Always
needed.
in the fall.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yep. 100%.
Not that it won't be funded, it's just, let's see where the real
It's
numbers
funding
come in.
actual and
Let's wait
not
for,
budget
Yeah.
a high number, just to
where do all
budget.
these people live?
I don't know, but they all log in to watch us.
We keep adding more and more residents to the town.
They have multiple devices, they're looking at it
more and more people to
multi-screen.
pay taxes. That's
Hey, I'll
great.
take it.
Can we get that tax revenue?
Starting to rival
So
the
for
March
Monday-
Madness numbers.
Yeah.
I'm making these final revisions to the budget. I'm gonna put it all in column 3 on the Zobrio system.
Zobrio.
I'm gonna update your budget summary sheet and I'm gonna change the ATM warrant accordingly with all these adjustments. Send it all back out to you for one last review, hoping that you can finalize next Monday.
Are we, or are we good with it? Well, you're not gonna want us to finalize all those changes
I
in a
would rather
verbal
you did not.
amended memo,
No,
vote,
he's
so
gonna
that's
wanna
fine.
see it written.
Yes.
Now, that being said, I would say if capital and finance wish to vote to recommend, as discussed tonight and amended, and are comfortable with that, and we're not planning to make any major changes and don't want to have to come back next week for another joint, you can do that.
FinCom won't have a quorum next week, so
Okay, so,
We
So
would
you'll have to
probably-
do your vote tonight.
yes.
yeah, then that's fine. And
And any
if
changes,
we make any significant changes, then we would pull the recommendation and
Yeah.
I was gonna say, any of the changes that we would likely make would just be within the discussion that we had tonight. It wouldn't be any major changes. to-
it should be just to tie it up to what we just said,
Right.
not anything more. We're not gonna get 200 by next Monday. So,
Not unless you're making a donation.
You could go door knock all those
You said
10,000
200
residents we've got.
pennies or dollars? Okay, so that is a wrap on the budget items, I
So
think.
you would like for FinCom,
When we go through the ATM,
you want us to wait to the ATM, do them all?
because that's where your recommendations
okay.
live. So I mean,
Fine by
unless
me.
you want to do it differently,
Nope, that's fine by me.
it's your recommendations.
Before we leave
ATM, yeah.
annual budget,
Yes.
I just want to say one thing. It's been brought up several times, and I was part of the conversation, about holding people to a certain request that goes out with the budgets. except our past precedent has been set that although we make that request, we fall short of doing anything about it when push comes to shove. And I think if we're going to make that request, it shouldn't be in the 11th hour of saying, well, we told you. No, we also told them in FY 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24 and didn't do anything about it. Be very clear in the language that we're putting to them that these are the specific line items that have the ability to be increased because we know there's no increase. The bottom line needs to be level funded if that's the request of that fiscal year, or a certain percentage increase if that's that request for that year. And then what the boards are willing to do or what their steps are if they come in and they don't meet those criteria. If your budget doesn't meet this criteria, we will make amendments to that, to your request, based on our recommendations of what we wanted to see. But have that known up front that this is going to be the steps. So there's no hidden like, well, we've never done that before, and then all of a sudden we're like, no, we're cutting your budget here, we're cutting it there, we're cutting it there. Just very clear that this is the requirement of how you submit it. We want to be able to compare apples to apples and know that every single, budget looks the same so that you can see what the narrative requests are versus what the authorized requests are versus what the increase to the total amount was recommended or asked for, and then you can start having that dialogue. So just throwing that out there because it's related to the budgetary cycle. So I agree with you. I just think we haven't done any service to the department heads of doing anything to really hold that line. We just complain about it every year and then find a way to balance the budget and then move on. So I'm just as guilty. So that's why I'm throwing that out there. Just being a little more clear and upfront about the next steps if that request isn't followed. What does the board intend to do with those budget requests? So that's all.
Then I would just say that we stop calling it guidance, because it's not. And part of what you just said is exactly what I thought we did do this year. That this is where the exceptions can be made, and this is, so I did think, and maybe I'm the only one who did, but I did think that some of that was to be expected for this year. And so maybe at the start of the season when we review stuff, it's not guidance, it's requirements. And this is how it will be done. This isn't, because I do agree, it doesn't do any good when we say this is what we're going to do and then all of us sit here and don't do it. We're just reinforcing that we're not going to do anything.
Right. Well, set the stage now for next year, because I know department heads are watching these or sitting here. Next year, expect that the guidance is going to be similar to this year, to level fund or whatever that is. But if you don't, then we will, and we won't give you other things most likely, or at least that's probably how I'll recommend that we set that clear directive instead of guidance. So then it's very clear, if you follow, we'll do what we can. If you don't, this is what'll happen.
Could I ask you?
We'll set that formally when the budget cycle starts again, but be prepared.
There's something that Scott said I didn't quite understand. Here are the lines that might change, but are we saying to everybody, next year you submit to us the exact same budget you've had approved this year, period, end of story?
No.
Okay.
We'll set that guidance in October, but that may say that. But we'll be clear about what it is, right?
The idea this year was we understand that there are increases to salaries. We understand that there were certain things that we said you can project out a small increase for power, utility. There are things that we said we understand those are going to happen.
Okay.
But the bottom line was, where are you cutting within your own budget so that the FY25 versus FY26 total budget requested was level funded. So you're absorbing the increases on certain line items, and then, which is exactly what we saw in a couple of the budgets. I think the library director did a phenomenal job, and kudos to the director for doing that. It was, the narrative is where it was embedded, said, by following your guidance, I had to cut from these 5 line items, which put me at a deficit of services. I'm requesting that these be put back in, but your guidance told me to do X, Y, and Z, and that's what I did. And so it allows the comparison of all the departments, and then you say, all right, these make sense, these should go back in, let's talk to them more about this, why this would be cut over something else. So then you just have similar budgets set up the same way, instead of some putting those increased line items in various budgets so that it just creates ambiguity about where the increases really are. So that's all.
I appreciate the explanation, and as long as the department heads are able to put in the narrative, here's what we have to cut, here's what we need if you want to keep having what you had before, they have that option. Maybe we do it, maybe you don't, depending on what they're asking for. We just need that flexibility, or you just can't continue to level fund forever. Just isn't going to work.
We need the information.
Yeah.
And again,
Okay.
the fruit salad's hard. If we can try to keep it more apples to apples across all the budgets that we need to review to understand what the puts and takes are and compare them.
Okay.
I think Deb mentioned the narrative for the library, and not picking on anyone, but it was a very good example of exactly what we're looking for and asking for. Am I correct in that? Was that
Oh,
one?
I would like to
So we
see
can provide as a sample.
that level of narrative from every department.
Right.
That was a phenomenal narrative, and it gave us, at least for me, it answered every question I had before she even got to her budget hearing. And it was done extremely well.
So I think we'll include examples too, to help everyone understand what we want to see and what our expectations are.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
drag that out. I just
it's
wanted to
important,
put
it's
that out
important,
there.
and it's to avoid the frustration and the challenges that we run into to try to make this as smooth as possible. Okay. ATM?
We should be going to the second one you sent, correct?
The
From-
three of you have the one from council, but council's feedback didn't touch any numbers or anything else. It was
Is it just minor language stuff?
It is.
minor language.
Okay, I didn't review it, so if
It
it's just
is,
minor
yeah.
language stuff,
Yep.
then unless there's anything of substance that you noted, well,
No,
You
as you
wanna
get
call
to
out,
each page,
we'll-
I'll
Okay.
let you know.
sounds good. So we added the FERC charter article as discussed last meeting. At this point, no guidance from assessors, so we will defer the Veterans and the HERO Act piece until a future meeting, a future STM or such. The Historical Commission, although I need to send a follow-up to the chair about kind of what the direction was in the meeting that she didn't attend. The guidance was that we needed a vote from them to what they wanted. That doesn't exist, so again, that'll fall to a special. The Pearl Beak Care Museum Committee, establishment of that, I had a question. That doesn't need to be town meeting, does it? We can establish that as the select board, could we not?
You could.
Okay, so I think that one, maybe it does go to one sometime to solidify it for a long term, but we could always establish and create that on our own along the way here too. So to kind of keep those things moving, if that's the feedback we get based on the prior request or potential vote request coming.
Can I just ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Based on if we move forward in this direction, we expect to no longer have a quorum in short order on the Historic Commission.
Understood.
So in terms of the ongoing projects that they're currently working on, who's taking that over?
I mean, I'm not the liaison, but I know I was on the last comment from the last feedback from the chair. Again, we gave clear guidance to the attendees because they didn't have a quorum, which was expected. Like we had confirmed a quorum they could have made the motion and the recommendation here that that's what they wanted done. If you two feel differently, I believe the guidance is like, if we don't have a recommendation they have a quorum today. If we don't have a recommendation from them where they voted and said, we believe this should be changed, and we're asking you to put that on, again, I feel like if we move that forward without that, then that's us acting on the feedback of a few members, not a vote of of a quorum of the body. And I don't feel like that is what we should do.
I agree, and I understand the ramifications of
Yeah.
not doing anything with it, because that's your fear, is that,
I'm under a contract with the state by September 30th, so I have to finish that project and somebody will have to make decisions. So if they can no longer meet and produce those decisions, I need you all to take it over.
Right. And I'm not saying that, at least personally, that I will sit here and say we don't end up making a decision to put something forward because that's the situation we're in or the situation that's imminent, because we may
Right.
have to.
Right.
But I am personally not ready to say we're gonna put that on the ATM.
Okay.
Because
didn't
we have a
want to
little
not bring
time
that
and I feel like there's a lot of interest in doing this from everything that I've heard in restructuring the membership and also, beginning a focused group that's around the museum, separate from overall historical items. I get it, but if there's that much motivation between making that happen, then we should be able to get a vote of a quorum of members that says this is what we want to do because they're invested in doing it. So, I mean, that's where I stand on it. But I guess the question at this moment, and I appreciate you bringing up the concerns because those are real and those are things we will have to deal with depending on how we progress from here. The question to the board members, does any of that change whether we do the effort to put it on an ATM tonight? So we contemplate we'll have an STM this fiscal year based on the stuff we've deferred and the things that are going on. So there should be another opportunity before the year's out.
I mean, the flip side is, Pete, I think you just said they're meeting tomorrow. Is there an opportunity to put it on there, have them meet tomorrow? If they don't take any action and give us direction, it gets bypassed because it's not our request. We have it written there, but it's contingent on getting guidance from them. I'm only saying that so that when we meet next week, we have something in there, or is it,
Again, I will leave it up to the three of us to make the decision.
That's what
My
yeah.
stance is going to be, I said last week, no new ads.
Agreed.
And I'm not going to change from that. If you both want to because of the situation and the circumstances, I respect that. We'll put it on.
I mean, their
but-
term runs until June 30th, and they're actively in there working right now until June 30th. So as long as there is a special before June 30th to take this up and make that change to bring it down to 5 and create the new board. I wouldn't create the Pearly Care Committee until you have resolution on the other one. You run the risk of not having, you have members
Or
like just
after July
abandoning.
1, if there's not a quorum, and it doesn't make a difference.
Correct.
But I agree with
One or
you,
the other,
absolutely.
whichever
Absolutely.
happens first, either July 1 or,
Absolutely.
So-
If this is what they want, they have a meeting tomorrow. They should have a quorum if they're motivated enough. They can take a vote, they can bring it to us, and we can put it on an STM. And if they don't have a quorum and they don't vote and there's no action, we as the select board will take over whatever responsibility Brian needs us to do.
And any other action from there based on that?
okay.
I agree with that. And I would say we told 3 members very clearly when they came and didn't have a quorum that that's what we wanted. We understood it. We supported the idea of it. We wanted a vote. That's what the quorum wanted. And that was a month ago or more. So this isn't new. The lack of clarity seems to be a lack of effort. So it's not a big lift. Just that's what we need. And then we'll move it forward and we'll make an STM happen if that's what we need to do. Okay. Amendment to the revolving fund bylaw to allow fees and associated costs with road openings. So we talked about that. That will be deferred as well to an STM because it's new
Yep.
and we don't have it fully defined right yet. Likely we'll do it, but not now. Okay. The ATM overall.
I have a change to make to your election warrant on page
One of the warrant.
4, past the cover page in the index. I just need to strike in that opening paragraph and ballot questions. The town clerk and I met yesterday
There are no ballot questions.
and confirmed there's no citizens petitions, no ballots. So we're going to strike that. And there was one oversight.
That is the page number to page 1, right? The top right corner?
Yes,
Sure.
Okay,
yes.
that's fine. You
Yes.
said page 4 and then I went somewhere else and went back to where I was.
Well,
Okay.
unless you're talking numbered page 1, which is the page 1 right after it too.
Do we have 2-page ones?
You do have 2-page ones. Sweet. Just noticed that.
We love pagination in these things. It's always our favorite. That and
We will get
table
that
of
corrected.
contents.
Yeah. Good catch. Thank you for
Okay,
catching
well,
that.
we have an error.
So the true page one.
The true page one.
3-page one?
So we're going to be striking that that reference to the ballot questions, and then there's just a correction on the second listing for the Board of Assessors. That should be a 1 seat for 1 year. So I'll be making that correction.
So 1 assessor for 3 and a 1 assessor for 1?
Correct. So those two things, and then your election warrant is ready.
Okay. That reminds me, tree warden at some point. Off-season, we want to earmark, we may want to look at possibly changing that to a planning. I think we talked about that last year. Never got back to it.
Yep.
Okay, no changes, Article 1.
Your procedural motion just above that.
Yes.
The word objective should be objection, so we'll make that one correction.
That's a good point. I objective to what you're saying.
Is your objective reasonable?
If it's personally motivated, probably not. Okay. Article 1, slate.
No issues.
Can say, how about can we just
Article
skip
2?
through the ones that have changes? Instead of going through all of them?
Sure.
1, 2, and 3 are good. We're on the
Anything from
4.
council on those? Good?
Nothing from council on those ones.
Okay. 4.
So 4, I was able to update with the Maya portion. And then broke out where it's all being attributed to in the existing budget.
Okay. We had a bill from 24 from Maya we didn't have in the budget. That's what that says.
Yeah, I don't know. They still can't tell me why we didn't have that billed to us early in the year. That's never happened before. So I made it clear that there was nothing I could do until we went back to town meeting.
Okay. Any concerns?
None.
The only other note from council on that one is in the article information. We usually carry 9/10. He clarified that that's only a requirement for special town meetings. For the annual town meeting, that reads 4/5.
Because 2/3 and
Wait, hold
9/10
on.
wasn't enough. Now we need to have it.
I like the 9/10 because it's a higher threshold, but
Then what? Then did you
4/5.
say 4/5? It's the dumbest
So
thing I've ever
8/10.
heard
We
of.
can do 8/10 instead of 9/10. It's okay.
Yeah, so we have to have 80% approval.
Okay, so we'll adjust it to the
so if you're
accurate.
Okay.
comfortable with that, I will
4/5.
make that a. I'll make that
Sure.
I've never heard of
Richard's
that.
would be able to figure all this out.
We will program. Are we calling them Richard's clickers? We will program Richard's clickers to calculate out every one of these.
Fantastic.
We're gonna start the programming next week.
We're going to call them Rick's Clicks.
There you go.
There you go.
He's gonna love it.
Article 5.
Looks good.
Okay.
Articles.
Say that.
That's good. Article 6.
So Article 6 now needs to be revised with all the changes you made tonight.
Okay,
So I will make
But it
those
will be
revisions. Send it back to you.
As budgeted. Yep.
beautiful. 7?
7. So I just had a question. He did make some changes just to the part where it talks about Section 108 of the Master General Laws. So he just made a quick revision to that. There was a reference to the Acts of 1947. He's suggesting that we strike all of that.
Okay.
So I don't.
As long as it
know that you
materially
all
doesn't
care.
change what we're supposed to do,
Nope.
nobody's concerned.
So I'm going to make that
Why we
change,
pay
and I'll
him.
build in for next week. I'm assuming you're not making any changes to the stipends. So I'm going to put it in the way.
We didn't contemplate any.
Nope.
We didn't.
Put it in the way it is.
Yeah.
So I'll build it in the way it is, and I'll
As
make that
is
change
what
from
it is.
council. Okay.
It'll only incorporate positions that are on the wage tables
Yep.
for changes.
Correct.
Okay. 8
Article-
adjusted as discussed.
that already reflects the elementary education previously
There's no changes.
adjusted. Correct.
Okay.
9, I will adjust.
Okay.
10 is as adjusted, is as shown.
As shown
Correct.
is reflects what you were presented.
Same for 11?
11 reflects the change you made at the last meeting, which is that 13,680
To level fund, yeah. And
to level fund it and put that into capital stabilization.
Okay.
Does listing it out that way anticipate that the fund actually exists?
Yes.
Does it? Okay. Do we potentially need to say retained earnings if we haven't gotten there yet?
You could.
Okay.
He has a question when we get to that section where I
Okay.
propose the language, so that may help us reconcile those two pieces.
Okay. 12 is no change.
No change.
13, these were the continuing appropriations, which we didn't discuss
Correct.
at length, but I know we touched on them before.
Mhm.
No concerns.
No.
Done.
14,
Looks like all the capital.
15. No changes there.
No, that's correct. Yes, that's correct. No, that looks good.
Okay. He did make a note on, which article is that, 15.
15?
This is in the article information.
Mm-hmm.
So remember I asked you, or I posed that there was potentially a legal change to special purpose stabilization funds? So he is informing us Chapter 77 of the Acts of 2023 have changed the threshold for appropriation is now a simple majority.
Anytime or ATM?
Anytime.
Okay.
No?
Just didn't know if it was 4
So the
fifths,
capital
not special.
stabilization is considered a special purpose stabilization fund from his reading. And that, if you would like me to, can be reflected instead of a 2/3 to a
Onward.
majority.
Yeah.
Yes,
Make that
please.
change?
Yes, please.
Yes.
And so then that answers the question about the two that we're proposing.
Right, those would be simple
They would be
majority as well.
majorities.
Okay.
Okay, I'll make
Okay.
that change.
16 appropriation for wastewater looked good.
Yep.
17 for water. I don't know why the title turned red. Maybe I
Because it's
missed something.
highlighted.
Yeah, but did we change something in it?
It wasn't there before.
Oh, okay, got it.
It's
We had missed that one last time. Got it.
when you all approved it, I thought it was already in there as a placeholder and it wasn't, so I
Okay.
added it in.
Okay.
And that was the only water project, correct?
Yes.
Yep, okay. So then everything else gets renumbered because I added that, so you'll see little track changes in each of the titles.
Okay. Revolving fund spending limits, no changes. Did he
No.
have anything on that one?
On which one?
Revolving,
No.
the new 18.
Nope.
19. No change, right?
Let's see if he's got any notes.
So, okay.
I'm not seeing
Do we
any
think
notes
it's
on it.
confusing? I guess I'll just ask this. The language talks about the free cash plus the items shown in the table. Should we include free cash in that table? So is it confusing to people that we're putting in 1.15 but only showing 85 in the table?
Yes.
Yes.
Because
Because
it was
looks like you're only
confusing to
putting
me
85.
when I looked at it
So
quickly.
yeah,
You
can
want
we
me to
just
add
drop first free cash into that table?
Okay.
Yeah, maybe just
So
an
that you
additional
just
line
look
at the
at-
bottom,
Yeah.
like a
Balance
subtotal.
it all
and
out.
a-
Yeah.
Okay, I will do that.
Because my first glance, I was like 85. So
But
Maybe
there's no-
total from other articles, and then do another
Yeah.
line free cash, that, and then
Okay.
grand total. So
Yeah.
just kind of like breaking them up.
And I did miss one change he made. Right after the 84,968, he just wrote in to the capital stabilization fund. Apparently he thought that needed clarity.
okay.
So I don't think that's,
I would even recommend putting the free cash number on top of the table and then adjust, subtotal for the table and then grand total for the
Oh,
number.
start
so
with the
that-
bigger
Yeah.
one first.
Because the way the article reads,
Yeah.
it starts with free cash and then goes down, so
keeps it
That makes
consistent.
sense.
Oh, yeah.
let's
Okay.
start with free cash, add the table, subtotal,
Subtotal.
grand total, boom.
Okay, I
Yeah.
can do that for you.
Sounds good. Opioid.
He didn't make any changes there.
Good.
Though that's a special purpose stabilization fund, so you assume that would also be majority, but
It would.
he left it as 2/3.
Really?
Well, I would change,
We slack him.
I mean, we can always ask if we want to, but it doesn't matter.
I don't think we're gonna have a problem with that.
Establish water stabilization, did he have anything on either one of those?
So, yes. So one in the article information, he said it requires a 2/3 to establish instead of a majority. So that has been added. And he made the same note on both of them because there was the reference to 100% of the amount approved as capital outlay at the annual town meeting warrant being authorized to be transferred in. So not necessarily needing another appropriation vote to allow the treasurer to move it.
Okay.
So what he wrote was MGL 40 Section 5B allows the dedication of any, and this part's in quotations, particular fee, charge, or other receipt. And he's not clear that the way that that's currently worded as what is appropriated or is approved as capital outlay qualifies as one of those three. Once the fund is created, transfers to the fund only require a simple majority vote. So the clarity could be, if you want, we can remove that sentence, the 100% of the amount approved as capital outlay. We could just remove that sentence if you wanted to. And I can just get clarity from him that the way that we structured those two articles, identifying a transfer into stabilization fund with the approval of a simple majority, is sufficient to authorize the treasurer to do it. Is that
Excuse me.
an acceptable approach?
If he can get behind it, I'm good with it.
So I'll just verify with him in the morning.
Yeah, but if it gets to the end of what we're looking to have
Yeah.
done, yeah.
I just don't want you all to have to have a separate article every annual to separately
Authorize the
authorize
transfer.
that transfer. So, okay, I will ask.
Okay. Maybe I'm not following it now. So if we're gonna allocate 100% of the capital outlay, i.e. water this year, $13,000.
Mm-hmm.
So up above, we funded it from retained earnings, and then this is saying we're gonna go put it in capital stabilization until we use it? If it's 100% of the outlay?
I don't know where retained earnings comes into what you just said, but
The capital article above comes from retained earnings. For water, for example?
correct. But
I guess
these
I'm
articles,
not getting, where are we getting the 100% of the money that's going to go in there
if
for
you go
capital
back up,
outlay?
capital outlay is now listed in your approved estimated expenditures for the water department that we're asking the voters to vote on. And there's
So in there, okay.
correct. So if that's their appropriating article about their estimated receipts, estimated expenditures,
So 100% of what's in that budget plan for the year
correct,
listed under capital
correct,
would go in there
correct,
every year?
correct.
Okay.
What he's saying is
Because
that's not
nothing
specific
from
receipt.
existing retained earning receipts or anything else?
Doesn't even talk
Doesn't
about
touch
retained
it up?
earning.
Okay, got it.
Correct.
Got it. All right, now
Um,
I understand. Sorry, I wasn't following.
So he's not saying that we can't include that language. He's just saying, I don't know that that is a specific enough
Okay.
fee or charge. So I don't know how useful it is,
Okay.
I think is what he's trying to get towards. So we can strike that sentence, but I just want to clarify that the way we've worded the additional article up top is sufficient to authorize the treasurer to move it into stabilization for the voters. So,
Okay. We still have to deal with how to move some retained earnings and how to remove retained earnings on an ongoing basis if we wish to. Those still have to get addressed in the future.
and I think we'll have to do that in the next fiscal year.
That's fine.
Yep.
So that defers the answer that we need from Pete.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What are we on, 24?
Mm-hmm. 23. No changes though, unless there's
No.
something from council.
Brian, what is the next article that you have that council has comments on?
The general bylaw article. I mean, he's got little grammatical stuff, but nothing of
Yeah.
legal consequence. So the general bylaw for the fire department.
Okay.
His recommendation is in subsection 1.1. in 1.3 and 1.4 to add it's the same phrase in all three of them, after the word buildings to write connected to the municipal alarm system. So I need to understand that better.
We don't have one.
Well, so
We're not
that's
in
the
the city.
question. So Selectman Loin and I were having this conversation before the meeting. In prior decades, you would have had the wired,
Absolutely.
right? All
They're
of those
still
are
on the wall,
disconnected
it's not
in every
connected to
town.
anything.
Correct. So I just want to make sure that he's not referring to antiquated technology that's no longer in use. The modern version would be cellular dialers or some 24/7 monitoring company that notifies 911 and dispatches. That's how that happens today. So I just want to make sure that that practice is still covered by this language he's recommending.
Okay.
So I will get you an answer for that for your next meeting.
Because the modern version is a fire alarm system.
That's the modern
Which
version.
then
which will
notifies
likely evolve
differently.
again,
Okay.
right? So I don't think that's a financial consideration, but that's the feedback he gave us. And the only, on the FRCOG article, the only thing he is recommending is that we strike the words "and enact" from the initial sentence.
What was this?
This is now Article 26.
See if the town will vote to
Oh,
adopt.
there's an issue in the information on 25. So I was just checking if you were still on 25. The 5 or more uses in the article information on 25.
Approval of select board establishment.
It's 5 or more units.
Yep. Yeah, the town clerk caught that and asked about that too.
Oh,
So,
okay. I
Yep,
didn't
we'll
know
make that
one
change.
was- The meaning is different.
Yes.
Sorry, back to 26.
So 26, that was his only recommendation. He reviewed the charter and says that the article is in alignment with the provisions of the charter, so he was comfortable with it.
Okay.
And that was it.
Okay. In addition to the free cash in the capital stabilization article, just to be clear, we're adding the RNA too. So we'd add that to the table as well because we have the 100 now. Yeah, we're putting in there.
But that's I guess I could work it into the
So
same
raise,
article.
it's this much from raise and appropriate, this much from free cash, this much from other articles, right?
It's just as much work as creating another article. So yeah, I'll work it in and we'll use
whatever.
Selectman Loin's suggestion of subcategorizing the
Each
table.
one.
At least you can all look at it and see if you like the presentation. Worst case, we just tease it as 2 separate articles.
Could you, and I don't know if this is allowed because it would be the verbiage of the article, does it have to be just one giant sentence, or can you bullet it and do like this much from here, this much from here, this much from here? I just think when you're calling it out in the
Yeah.
text, it would look a little clearer. If you
I
can't,
don't-
that's totally fine.
I don't know, but let me ask.
Okay.
I mean, when we adopt bylaws, bylaws sometimes are pages long,
Right.
and they clearly have sections and subsections and bullet points, and so there's got to be a way to do it.
Okay.
But let me ask.
Worst case, you
If it's
just,
not difficult, it would be nice.
you
Yeah,
just
let
put
me
them on a new line without any bullets or any formatting. It's just lots of space.
And once
Still
you
a
print it,
sentence.
all those squiggles
The
will go
periods
away.
are not until the end. Still a sentence.
I could do that too.
I mean, whereas.
Yeah, I think the point is you want obviously the citizens to be able to follow.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so any articles from FinCom and capital standpoint that have your name on it that shouldn't, or don't have your name on it that should?
We always vote the warrant as a whole, so I don't think it matters.
Well, yes, you do, but in turn, the
Only puts it
finance
on the ones
recommends
That's
is not
true.
on everyone,
That's true.
so is it on all the ones you want to, so that when you make the
Mhm.
blanket, it fills in only those, rather than,
As far as I saw, it looked good.
that- Okay.
I would say the only one I don't think that FinCom necessarily would be weighing in on is the article for the rapid entry system for the fire department.
The bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll strike that.
anything for capital? Good with those? All right, you guys want to make votes? As amended, I guess, right?
So I would entertain a motion to accept the annual town meeting warrant as amended from one of you fine gentlemen.
I'd like to move that we accept the annual town meeting, or recommend it as expressed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? There you
Thank
have
you.
it, sir.
Excellent.
Capital.
It's Capital doing one.
Ben, are you guys?
I think that, well, we didn't do it because I won't be here next week and there won't be a quorum.
For FinCom, Capital should have a quorum next week, I believe. Unless
Oh,
Ben wants
just
to.
I
Is
won't.
Capital coming next week?
Oh, no.
Well, that's why I was giving the option. If you
Right,
want to,
if
if
you
you want to
do it tonight,
recommend
then
it
you won't need to
as
do it.
amended, then you don't have to attend.
I
and
would
we
make a
don't have
motion
to.
to accept it as amended
I'll
for
second.
capital.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Nope.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all.
Does that mean you don't need FinCom or Capital next week?
That's what it sounds like.
I
At
think
the
I've got what I
moment,
need.
Correct. At the moment,
Sweet.
correct.
Won't be here.
I think, is that the end of joint business? I believe it is.
I think so.
If we play our cards right, we'll only need us for 15 minutes.
Oh,
next week.
God, don't say it, you just jinxed it. Okay, well, with that, then make a motion that we adjourn the joint meeting and continue the select board meeting at 9:22 PM.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you all. Give you a minute to get settled, and then we will continue on.
Where you're gonna go to.
You can ask him.
We may or may not. It's
It's already 9:20.
It's already 9:22 and we have executive tonight, so we're gonna go quickly. If it's a very quick one, yes. If it ends up being something that's more involved, we'll probably defer
They
it.
both. I know.
Yep, I figured. I'll be home
See you tomorrow.
when we're done. So
I mean, have you
I can
already
jump to it if you want to stay in case.
decided where it is?
We haven't discussed it.
Oh, you haven't discussed it at
This
all?
is the item.
This
We have-
is the first
it.
time it's come to us as an official.
Okay, I'll stay then.
Okay. So, okay, that's okay. Anything else, or you good? Okay. I'll go to it first. Because we'll either be quick or we'll defer, we'll continue it
defer.
anyway, so.
Which topic are you moving to?
North Street, North Street sewer extension. Discuss and potential vote on the North Street sewer extension.
Number 9.
Thank you, sir. So, Pete, this is obviously the area on North Street that was in discussion at length last year or beginning of this year.
October?
It was last year, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it
Yeah.
was last year, but I was blending together.
Yeah.
So this identifies all the structures that were in question
Correct.
along the side of the road, not in the road, beyond where we have on our layouts currently,
Correct.
and incorporates the additional lines that were dropped in during that.
Yes, the stubs that were dropped in, the 3 structures that are off the edge of the road, and beyond the last structure, it goes X amount of feet till it ends.
Okay. And it's just capped
Correct.
beyond the last structure?
Yep.
Okay. And there was some guidance from council on this too, that generally these are expected to be adopted by the town once installed, even if installed by, I believe that was some guidance from general counsel
Unless
on-
there's written
Unless
agreement.
there's some other written agreement, they would
Oh, excuse me.
default in statute to
Apologies.
be adopted and owned by the municipality after
Correct.
their installation for future maintenance and responsibility.
Uh,
Regardless of any records we have, we don't have any
Right.
contrary.
Unless the homeowner is really adamant that they want to own it and they want all of the responsibility of maintaining.
And we get
it.
that signed in triplicate.
Yes,
Right.
it's very expensive. I don't know any homeowner that wants that.
I don't either, and we don't have any clarity
No.
to that extent today. We don't have any documents to say otherwise.
We just found that
Just a
minute
little bits that
reference
we've
from
had, yeah.
2001.
So I guess the question is, do we formally adopt it? And if so, then have it added to our plans and prints and maintain it accordingly.
I think it cleans it up and yes, but
Question or comment?
Can I ask where the sewer line is going to stop on North Street?
So for those in the audience, because you're not mic'd, I know, right now. The question was, where does it stop on North Street? It stops where it currently is. This is not an addition to what's already there. This is adoption of what was installed some years ago.
Around
That
2001.
we don't have full documentation on whatever the agreement was at the time, and by default, the town should take, based on what our guidance is, should take responsibility for ownership of once installed. So it's there, it's in place. We've mapped out what's there. It's been, you guys have gone out and identified all of the existing structures and where it ends. So it's not anything new. It's just the town formally adopting it. And it extends,
to 219,
To 219.
thank you.
194 to 219.
Yep,
Okay, so that is the extension.
Yes.
correct. So it's kind of at the dip in the road as we head towards Northfield. It goes up to just about the crest and stops.
Right.
Right.
Not to 234 or 236.
It does not continue down that next
No.
incline
Okay.
today. It's stubbed just near 219, right?
Right.
That's where the cap is right now. Does that answer your question?
Not well, but yes. If you're at 234.
Is it unclear?
If you're at 234 or 236, it's not very impressive. If you're at 219, it's fine.
Okay, I don't follow. But
Yeah.
There's still a few more parcels before you hit the town line
That you
that
don't cover.
that aren't serviced by this
Oh, okay.
run.
Sure.
the impressive, I just didn't understand. It doesn't go as far as you may want. I get that. That's fair. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's just,
Absolutely. This is what is there from something that was agreed and done years before our time
Right.
here,
My
so.
mistake, I saw extension, I assumed it's extension.
This is a
Fair. It's an
Yeah.
extension from what the town has currently adopted and has on record as the town's. It has been in the ground for many years. And so this is kind of cleaning up that disparity between what's physically there and what the town has on record as owning and being responsible for.
Okay.
So. Does that at least clarifies what it's about?
It clarifies it.
Okay,
Thank you.
absolutely.
I'm just ready to make a motion if there's no. I'll make a motion to adopt the sewer main from 194 North Street to 219 North Street as part of the town's public collection system, and to instruct the wastewater superintendent to update the official maps accordingly.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Do you mind reaching out to Time Bond tomorrow and starting that process?
sure.
Thank you.
Um, In the essence of time, if we have some, we'll do them quickly, but if there's lengthy discussion, we'll defer. Discussion review of the proposed amendments to the sewer use regs, first read. Again, it's a first read, but is there anything of note to start?
1 second, just to see if anything was highlighted. I can't remember.
So, yes, on page 3 of the regs, I will say yes, but the director of the Town of Irving Department of Public Works. That should be reworded to be the superintendent of wastewater, right?
Yes, I went through this whole printout of the regs. I'm fine with everything that's in there except for that change that you just had mentioned.
That's your only recommended change?
That I could see, yeah, that
Okay.
should need to be changed.
Okay. You guys are fine with that? I assume we want to clear it up and align it
Yes.
with our current structure.
Yes.
Okay.
So the other things I called out to you all, it's just the Schedule B is referred to in the regs, but Schedule B is not attached. And I can't find any other reference to Schedule B. So I think we need to invent or create a schedule that aligns with, at minimum, the practice and what has been the rates to date. I found some references to rates on the application for sewer connections.
Okay.
I don't know if that's what your predecessors had intended to refer to when this was adopted, so we just need to reconcile that piece. I can make all the DPW references change to the wastewater superintendent. The only other thing that I would note is that in the feedback from council on the sewer main issue, he had started with a review of the regs. And the regs don't specifically talk about how can a developer or a private property owner approach you about extending the sewer, and what does that look like? And so this may provide you an opportunity to incorporate some language around how does somebody approach the sewer commissioners or the select board to discuss the cost of extending a sewer, if you're willing to do it and permit it. That at the end of that, it becomes property of the town of Irving. So that may be something that you do, even though these, I agree, I think these are largely in good shape, but that may be something that you want to do.
Makes sense. We should build out the fee schedules, just like we did with the road one and the others. Make sure it's at least as close to what exists, and then adjusted however you would recommend.
Okay.
Or, based on market and what the fees are for.
Okay.
Right.
And then we can review that. Schedule B, once we have one.
Okay.
Accordingly. Town administrator, yes. Town manager, town administrator, yes.
Yeah, there was a few.
There's a few of
clerical-
those, like just
they're
clean up
fine.
to our language, right?
Right.
Drop Irving, it's wastewater, it's PLTW, it's superintendents, whatever
Yeah.
those references, those are just cleaning up,
Just do that. Okay.
Yep. clean up to our current org structure, yes.
You got it.
Any others in there anyone had?
Nope.
Nope.
Anything else you had?
No.
Okay.
That was it.
It's a good start. If council has recommended language or some sample subset
Let me ask him.
for how we engage and do North Street better in the future.
Yep.
Should someone want to do an extension and we may adopt or may not in an agreement, how does that all look?
Agreed.
Okay.
Okay. I will send this off to council and ask for that.
Okay. I believe that was it
I think so.
for you, Pete, at the moment?
Excuse me?
That was everything for you, yes?
I believe so,
That you
yes.
know of? Okay, so make sure I didn't miss anything. There's a lot on here tonight.
No, I
Okay.
don't.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Review
Good night.
of, let's see, meeting minutes. We have February 10th, 25, and February 24th, 25.
Motion to approve minutes from February 10th and February 24th as written.
Second.
Any discussion?
None.
All in favor?
Aye.
Review and issuance of the 14th water commitment FY25.
Motion to approve the 14th water commitment FY25 in the amount of $54,865.10.
Second.
Any discussion?
None.
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Review of surplus equipment request, senior center first read.
First read done.
First read done, no
Check,
comments.
check, double check. No concerns.
Thank you, gentlemen.
review and discuss the revised intermunicipal agreement with Northfield EMS. This is, effectively a first read for the board. Council reviewed it initially. All councils from all 4 towns brought it back, all of council's feedback, myself, chief, and each town's representatives to the EMS IMA group or whatever, probably become the advisory council eventually. And incorporated, modified, made changes to the overall IMA based on all of that feedback. Cleaned it up. This is what we have now. It will go back out, or has gone back out to council for another review now that we've done that 4-town kind of cleanup. My ask is just, is there anything in there that was of significant note? I think I have till next week, so if you guys want one more read through it, my goal is to get council feedback if there's nothing significant, and then if there's nothing significant that you all have noted that we may want to go into executive and discuss from a bargaining position, or whatever the right word is for that, but because it is an agreement that we're all part of, then I can give that back to the committee so that they know they can kind of get this finalized, because we need to.
You're okay if you get that next Monday night?
Let me confirm, I believe so. Because I think our tentative review is the week after. So we have a placeholder if there's any major things we need to come back to as the group, the oversight. But we don't have a lot of time to get this done in time for all the ATMs, because we want to have this finalized
Right.
and in place when we're voting on funding these things. And I seem to have lost it in my calendar. Where is it? EMS. Yes, we have a tentative meeting on the 20th, so ideally next week, worst case maybe even the week after, but next week, yeah.
Okay.
So that's my ask, obviously. If there's anything of note tonight, if it's something you'd want to discuss in public session, please bring it up. If it's something you'd want to discuss in executive, let me know. I'll make sure to put it on for our next meeting.
Okay.
Or when you do go through it before Thursday, let me know if there's anything of note that you would like to discuss in executive, and we'll put it on. Please.
Yep.
Thank you. Carrie? Review and potential vote to waive the conflict of interest for Nutter, McLennan, and Fish. So they are special counsel, and they have the special municipal designation that's required to be able to do this. They are special counsel we use for wastewater, primarily related to POTW number 2, right? With Erving Industries. It's usually when we leverage them, so you may not be as familiar. I think Scott's been here when we've used them before.
Mm-hmm.
They are looking to represent Spearmint, formerly somebody else, recently changed their name, and are looking for a waiver of conflict from us because they're our counsel, so that they could represent someone else's interests, and the same waiver from Spearmint because they are our counsel for other things. Questions, concerns? I think their position would be they don't represent us in anything related to what they are representing Spearmint for, and we're only utilize them for special use, and this isn't even
gonna
close to that
say-
realm. Or even, I don't believe, near any wastewater infrastructure of any sort, or anything like that.
Yeah. It looks like all they need from us is an email stating
I
that
think
we
a vote,
consent.
just
Yeah.
that we have waived it for the record, just to, have on file from a legal standpoint, but it's not any formal form or anything, as far as I understand.
And this is not the council we would utilize for any type of potential issues regarding their relationship
Storage
with
or-
their other client.
Not for the project specified, right?
We've never used them for land use or permitting. We've always used general counsel or a specialist that we brought in for a particular issue. They've only represented you on wastewater. My entire time here, it's only been, and to your point,
It's really
POTW
even
2.
within that, it's really
Yeah.
in the Erving Industries Agreement and POTW number 2.
Okay.
They advise us on our 77 evergreening forever agreements.
Yeah.
1977. Any concerns otherwise?
As long as it's not Evergreen Circle.
No,
It's not.
no.
It's not. This doesn't
I'm sorry.
this doesn't release them from any requirement to have us
No.
as the whatever the term is, I can't think of, but that they have to represent us first should there become a conflict and an overlap. This doesn't absolve them of that ever if it's related to the work they do for us already.
If it's
This
related to the
assumes
work.
the work that
Right.
we are waiving does not overlap at all.
Correct.
Should it, we still have the right of first interest, and they don't
And
get
if,
to
and as he
violate that.
notes in here, if something does arise between the two parties and it does become a conflict, he will represent neither party.
Right, they will step away.
They will step away and.
Rather than resuming ours, they will
Right.
just not partake.
Correct.
Okay.
So I think
going
we're
back-
covered either way.
You want a
Going back to
motion?
the risk word, this seems relatively low risk for us.
Right.
Agreed. So
Do you want a
I'll make,
motion?
yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
okay. I'll make a motion that the town of Irving consents to waiver of conflict of interest request from Nutter McLennan and Fish LLP in regards to representing Granite Source Power on a project with Spearmint Renewal Development Company LLC. Is it Granite Power that changed to Spearmint? Is it Roseledge that
I
changed
don't know
to
the
Spearmint?
relationship between them.
Rosebrook Energy
okay.
Center.
You got them both covered.
Yeah, Granite Source Power, Spearmint Renewal, or Rosebrook Energy Center. Whichever
Second.
ones of those still exist. All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Review and discuss whether to comment on the 30-day notice of 40B project application for Evergreen Circle.
So I know this is all dated March 12th, but we received this last Thursday, so, or Wednesday evening into Thursday morning. So we were waiting for this, we were expecting this.
Right.
This is the official notification from the state that our partners RDI have applied for the 40B process, which we have already announced we're friendly to.
Right.
So this is triggering that process. You have a 30-day comment period, which is already in process.
Day
So this
two.
is your opportunity to comment on it if you'd like to. There's no requirement that you have to. I do think because it's a friendly, it wouldn't hurt us to just reaffirm that this is the town collaborating with RDI on this project. But they wanted to give you a copy of all of the submission materials. So a lot of this is going to be information that you've seen in one format or another over the last year of reviewing this project. I didn't see anything that stood out to me as a concern.
So we have, I mean, till probably the 11th, I think, effectively, so like next meeting, unless we call
Right.
something special. My recommendation, if you all agree, would be read through it, make sure it aligns with what you recall. If we need to dive into anything from the original proposals or anything seems amiss, we can discuss it and figure out if there's an issue before
Right.
the 11th. Ask the Senior Housing Committee and those who've been working on this to do the same.
Okay.
And then if we come back on Monday and there's nothing that stands out as a concern or different than expected, then we just provide that exact same feedback of, reaffirming it's friendly and we are in alignment with everything that you've,
Okay.
submitted that they submitted, right?
Right.
Agreed. Makes sense.
Yes.
And I think they noted for you that because of the size of our community, we qualify for technical assistance. So our zoning board of appeals can also, if they choose, have access to professional resources through Mass Housing Partnership, who we've worked with in the past. So I don't know if they will choose to avail themselves, but they want the town to know that that's a service.
And our council had identified that as a
Right.
great option and before we just pay him. So, to rely on, which I think is great. Okay.
On the same line of Evergreen Circle, you sent the email earlier today, MVP.
Yes. Oh, thank you. It was an unanticipated item.
Yes.
MVP. We've been certified for a few years. We're going to have to update our plan, but I did find out we are still eligible to apply into this round. And that's only relevant because RDI has reached out to us. They would like to know if we would collaborate with them to submit a grant application if they write the grant. Specifically, they want to work on the stormwater management for the property.
Right.
But because it's town property and because we're the certified entity, we would have to technically be the applicant, but they're willing and they're able to provide the capacity to create the application. And it would specifically be working on stormwater resiliency for the project. And so the question is, are you okay with us working with RDI to make that submission? Unfortunately, the deadline is
Very,
within the week, so
Yeah.
it's not too far away. I was able to confirm with MVP that we are eligible.
Okay.
they just got that
I-
confirmation
not
back this
shocked.
afternoon.
That's how these are. They're very short windows.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have anything planned for MVP. It doesn't compete with any MVP money we might have used for any of the other work, or
The
it
last
doesn't
time we
apply,
used-
right?
The last time we used MVP was on Wheelock Street. We replaced the culverts,
Yep. Okay.
so that was our last
It's not
project.
going to help us with the wastewater management, the water, the road, none of that anyway.
No.
So
Yeah, we're not.
we're not
Cutting
applying
ourselves
for it,
short.
and we're not. Yeah, it's not competing with any.
Nope.
If they're doing the lift,
I was gonna say, if they're willing
was
to do
gonna
the
say,
lift, and all we
where's
have to
the
do is review and
downside?
approve,
yeah, I was going to say if it's more of like we don't disagree with anything,
Yep.
but we're not doing the work.
I don't see a downside.
It's okay to work with them and apply.
I mean, we want
Yeah,
the project.
Please
so.
do.
Okay.
Not
We
only
want it
is
to be materialized out there,
Yeah.
so
Yep.
absolutely.
Project's
Anything that
moving.
helps.
Please
that.
do.
So
Okay. Perfect.
More money from the state for it, the better.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's due what, the fourth?
I think it's due on the 4th.
Yeah, Thursday, Friday.
Glad they
Friday.
have the bandwidth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I will let
Excellent.
them know that you've said okay, and we will help them with that. Thank you.
Do you need a vote? You're probably good with that.
If you would like to formalize it, that I'm
Do we
authorized to do
even
that.
have enough words to formalize it yet? I guess it's, yeah. Well, we'll make a motion that we will support and work with RDI on submission of a MVP grant proposal for stormwater management at the future Evergreen Circle
Okay.
development.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you,
Wasn't too
gentlemen.
bad ad hoc, huh?
Yeah, they're pretty good, actually.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
For-
well done.
For 10 o'clock at night?
For almost 10 o'clock.
Did I miss any?
Just
No.
Is this executive?
Executive.
Oh, the warrant.
Oh, warrant.
Oh, the
Thank you.
warrant.
Thank you. The one that we've been meaning to get cleaned up. So, notify the board that I have approved the payroll warrants, last pay cycle, reporting 19 payroll warrant for FY25. Aggregate amount was $213,462.93. And the benefits, 19 benefits warrant was in the aggregate amount of $73,608.64. And
Thank
then
you,
we
sir.
have our accounts payable warrant.
Yeah,
Motion.
motion to,
Executive.
No, I'll make a motion to
Oh.
approve the 20th accounts payable warrant for fiscal '25 in the aggregate amount of $356,927.30 as presented.
second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And with that, I move that we go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel regarding the highway superintendent. We will not return to regular session. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Roll call. Brian, will you call the roll?
Selectman Loin,
Aye.
Chairman Smith,
Aye.
Selectman Bastrash.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.